President Yang, Madam's first love, has also returned to the country. After 3 years of marriage, Yu Wei has been conscientiously acting as Mrs. Yang. She gives her husband enough face outside and is gentle and affectionate at home. Even if he is a stone, he can always be warmed up, right? While warming him up, his white moonlight returned home. He accompanied his white moonlight shopping. Yu Wei tolerated it. He danced with his white moonlight. Yu Wei tolerated it. Seeing the two of them wearing couple outfits, Yu Wei tolerated it. As a result, their white moonlight was pregnant. Chapter 1. Let's have a child. The moon is bright outside the window, and the clouds and rain have just stopped in the house. After not seeing each other for 3 months, the man is a little insatiable and has been tossing and turning for most of the night. Yu Wei came out of the shower, and Yang Wenju was putting on his shirt. The water drops from the ends of her hair slid down on the tight muscles on his chest, which had a few shallow scratches on them. She had just accidentally injured them. Yu Wei turned her head away and saw the wall clock. It was more than 3 o'clock in the morning. It's so late, where are you going? Yang Wenju didn't answer her question, but said coldly, don't forget to take medicine. Yu Wei was stunned. You didn't take any measures. Yang Wenju glanced at the empty box on the bedside, and curled the corners of his lips. Mrs. Yang is rarely so enthusiastic, and it's all used up. It was obviously him. Yu Wei's cheeks flushed, and after hesitating for a moment, why don't we have a child? The enthusiasm in the room that had not yet dissipated seemed to solidify in an instant. Yang Wenju buttoned up his clothes slowly, then suddenly pinched her chin and asked her to look up. Why, you want to tie me down with your child again? Meeting his cold eyes, the color on Yu Wei's face faded a little bit. I didn't. No. Yang Wenju sneered, have you forgotten how you became Mrs. Yang? Yu Wei's mind flashed back to the rainy night 3 years ago, when she was drunk and stumbled into the room. It was him who pressed her down and said he would help her. She shook her head and explained, I never thought of becoming Mrs. Yang. Yang Wenju tightened his fingers when he heard this, and Yu Wei's face wrinkled in pain. So, you have been wronged in the past 3 years. Yang Wenju smiled sarcastically, if you don't want to be Mrs. Yang, then do you want to be Mrs. Wang, Mrs. Li, or Mrs. Meng? Yu Wei's expression tightened, you know that's not what I mean. What do you mean? Yang Wenju shook her face away, you don't want to be my wife, but you want to have a child for me. Should I say you are noble or stupid? Yu Wei's face was pale, it was Grandma who kept urging us to have a child, so I. You have cleared yourself. Yang Wenju looked at her coldly, be your Mrs. Yang obediently, and don't think about things that you shouldn't. Yang Wenju left, but Yu Wei could never fall asleep again. The two have been married for 3 years. Although they are not in love, Yang Wenju is not too cold to her. She thought, it turns out that he still cares about those things in his heart. Yu Wei did not sleep all night. The servants delivered the medicine to her room early in the morning. Yu Wei looked at the medicine and felt bitter. After taking the medicine, she got up and watered the flowers and plants in the backyard. The phone kept ringing. Yu Wei glanced at it and saw that it was from her childhood friend group. Someone in the group said, big news, the 6th Miss of the Yang family has returned to China. Let's celebrate at Golden Years tonight. A lot of people in the group were shocked. The news kept ringing. Someone else said, I heard that President Yang personally took the 6th Miss back to China. The group became quiet again. Yu Wei had heard some rumors about Yang Wenju and the 6th Miss of the Yang family. However, when she married into the Yang family, the 6th Miss had already gone abroad. The only thing she knew about the 6th Miss was that her surname was Wen, not Yang, and her name was Wenxia. A little after 11 o'clock in the evening, Yu Wei received a call from Yang Wenju, asking her to pick him up at Golden Years. The Golden Years is the favorite entertainment club for these rich young men, but she has been married to Yang Wenju for 3 years, and Yang Wenju has never formally introduced her to his group of friends, so she rarely goes there. Yu Wei drove to the club. The Golden Years is a 5-story single-family building. It is located on the most prosperous street in the imperial capital, like a magnificent palace, with ambient lights all around, shining brightly in the dark night. Yu Wei called Yang Wenju, and after the call was connected, a woman's voice came, who is it? Wenju is drunk and can't answer the phone now. Did Yang Wenju not give her a note? Yu Wei held the phone tightly, which box is he in? I'll go in to pick him up. The woman reported the name of the box readily. Yu Wei pushed open the door. There were many men and women in the box. Yang Wenju was sitting on the leather sofa in the middle. He was wearing a black shirt, suit trousers, and his long legs were slightly bent. A beautiful woman sat next to him. She was wearing a white dress and his coat. From a distance, she looked like she was leaning on his arms. "Hey, Mrs. Yang is here." Someone saw Yu Wei and laughed and teased, "What a rare guest." Someone whistled. "Miss, you've seen the person. Are you satisfied?" The woman shook the wine glass in her hand, looked at Yu Wei carefully, and smiled without saying a word. "What do you mean by not talking?" "In order to satisfy your curiosity, our general manager Yang called his wife over with just one phone call." Although Yu Wei was not familiar with Yang Wenchu's group of friends, they were in the same circle and inevitably met each other. Wenxia was probably the only one who didn't know her. "What should I be satisfied with? She's not my wife." Wenxia smiled and looked at Yang Wenju. "Why not ask our president Yang if he is satisfied with this wife?" Yang Wenju raised his eyelids, glanced at Yu Wei, sneered, and said only one word, "Pretend." Yu Wei's heart tightened, facing the mocking eyes of everyone, walked to the sofa, and held Yang Wenju's arm. "You are drunk, let's go home." Yang Wenju stood up, his body was a little shaky. Wenxia looked at him worriedly. "Wenju, are you okay?" Yang Wenju did drink a lot of wine. His eyes swept across Yu Wei's calm little face. He had been looking at this face for 3 years, and today he was more and more upset. Never thought of being Mrs. Yang. Yang Wenju suddenly pushed Yu Wei away. His strength was not small. Yu Wei was pushed back 2 steps. The light in the box was dim. Someone suddenly stretched out his foot. Yu Wei was caught off guard and tripped. With a clang, Yu Wei fell on the coffee table, knocking over several glasses of wine. The wine soaked her expensive clothes, and her waist hit the corner of the table, which was painful. The box was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. Someone laughed, and the laughter was piercing. Yu Wei looked at her soaked shirt. She was glad that she was wearing dark purple today, otherwise she would be even more embarrassed. "Mrs. Yang, are you okay?" Someone came to help her, but Yu Wei refused. She didn't need the sympathy of this group of people. When Xia helped Yang Wenju to the door of the box, looked back at her, and smiled in Yang Wenchu's ear, "Your wife is quite tolerant." When Xia's voice was not loud, but it was enough for everyone in the box to hear. Yang Wenju didn't even turn his head, and said mockingly, "If you can't tolerate it, how can you be Mrs. Yang?" Standing up, Yu Wei looked at the man's back and clenched her palms. "Yang Wenju, you asked me to pick you up. Chapter 2 Your earrings are too ugly." Yang Wenju stopped, looked back at her, and laughed. "I don't want you to answer it now. Is it not okay?" "How can it be not okay?" She really made herself boring. Yu Wei forgot how she walked out of the golden years. The clothes on her chest were soaked by wine and the wind blew and she felt freezing cold. For a week afterwards, Yang Wenju did not return to the villa, nor did he call back. Early in the morning, Yu Wei received many calls, all wishing her a happy birthday. She looked at the calendar and remembered that today was her 27th birthday. Old Madam Yang had arranged a dinner for her a long time ago. The people from the styling studio had already arrived downstairs. After Yu Wei's styling was done, Yang Wenju still did not come back. The people in the studio looked at her cautiously. "Mrs. Yang, Mr. Yang's styling." Yu Wei looked at the dress that matched her skirt and called Yang Wenju. No one answered the call. She could only arrange for the people in the studio to go back first and rush to the old house herself. Yu Wei chose a lotus pink off-shoulder dress, which was both dignified and sexy. Old Lady Yang came to the entrance of the banquet hall and held her hand with a smile. "Wei Wei, your dress today is really beautiful. Where's Wenju? Why didn't he come with you?" "His company. Grandma." Yang Wenju wore a royal blue suit, and Wenxia followed him. Wenxia wore a water blue dress and had an elegant temperament. The two walked side by side, a talented man and a beautiful woman. The surrounding Yang family members exchanged glances. Why did these two people come together? Wenxia smiled and handed a gift box to Yu Wei. "Third sister-in-law, happy birthday." Yu Wei took the gift box. "Thank you." Old Lady Yang held Yu Wei's hand and walked in. The others stayed at the door to welcome guests. After walking 2 steps, Old Lady Yang glanced at Yang Wenju who was still standing at the door. "Wenju, come here." Yang Wenju followed. Old Madam Yang smiled and took out a red-bottomed gold-threaded object from her bosom and put it into Yu Wei's palm. Grandma specially asked for you to have many children and grandchildren. Try your best. Give Grandma a big fat great-grandson next year. Yu Wei's eyes dimmed when she thought of Yang Wenchu's words. Yang Wenju smiled and said, Grandma, don't worry. Wei Wei and I want to spend a few more years of our world together. A world for two. Old Madam Yang snorted in dissatisfaction. You fly around the world all year round, where can we have a world for two? Yu Wei said softly, Grandma, I want to play for a few more years. Yang Wenju looked at her and smiled sarcastically. Old Madam Yang patted the back of her hand. Wei Wei, you are a medical student, don't you know? If you don't have a baby, you will miss the best childbearing age. Hurry up. She knew it, of course, otherwise why would she be dizzy that night and touch his reverse scale? Next, Yang Wenju hugged her waist and greeted the guests. Yu Wei kept a gentle smile on her face, and her face was almost stiff. Yang Wenju suddenly leaned over and whispered to her ear, Mrs. Yang, your lipstick is smudged. Yu Wei looked at him in surprise and wiped the corner of her lips in a hurry. When she saw the teasing light in the man's eyes, her face flushed. Yang Wenju, is it fun to tease people? You look better when you don't smile. Yang Wenju put the wine glass aside. Take off the earrings. Although Yu Wei was puzzled, she still took off the earrings that matched her dress obediently. A servant happened to come over with a gift box. Madam, this is a gift from Country M. Yu Wei looked at the palm-sized gift box and was dazed for a moment. She quickly regained her composure and took it with a smile. Thank you. There was a card on the gift box, saying happy birthday, and the signature was at Meng. Don't you want to open it and take a look? Yang Wenchu's voice became colder. He thought of the gift box that she had locked in a glass cabinet and had never opened. Yu Wei shook her head. You haven't told me yet, why do you want me to take off my earrings? Yang Wenju pulled his hand back from his suit pocket and picked up the wine glass. Nothing, I just think your earrings are too ugly. After that, he strode away. Yu Wei cursed in her heart that he was sick. Yu's mother Han Chunyang walked up to her and handed her a gift. Baby, happy birthday. Yu Wei took it. Han Chunyang tidied her hair gracefully. Wei Wei, have you mentioned the project to Wenju? Our family is waiting to win the bid. Yang's has a project that is open to external bidding, which happens to be the area that the Yu family is involved in. Not yet. Why not? The bid will be open soon. Yu Wei casually replied, he is too busy these days. Are you too shy to ask? Han Chunyang knew her daughter's temperament best. I'll ask him. Don't ask. Why? You are his wife, we are all family, and we should make money together, isn't it right? This project is very large. According to the specifications of Yu's company, it is difficult to take over the project in one go, otherwise Han Chunyang would not have asked Yu Wei to ask Yan Wenju. Yu Wei naturally knew it, but he always kept public and private affairs separate, and the shallow relationship between the two of them probably wouldn't allow him to make an exception. Mom, don't mention it tonight. Han Chunyang looked at her helplessly. You. The surrounding lights suddenly dimmed, and a beam of light hit the center of the dance floor. Han Chunyang pushed Yu Wei. What are you standing there for? Go find Wenju to dance. Yu Wei looked around for Yang Wenju, but saw him holding Wenxia's fingertips and walking towards the dance floor. Wenxia looked up at him with a bright smile. Han Chunyang's face changed. Who is that woman? Today is your birthday. What kind of dance is she dancing with Yang Wenju? Yu Wei comforted her. That's the sixth miss of the Yang family, Wenchu's cousin. Sixth miss. Han Chunyang tried hard to search for information in her mind, and finally remembered something, sneering. What kind of sixth miss is she? That's not how you grab the limelight. Wenju, too, doesn't he know what kind of occasion it is today? Han Chunyang said, and was about to rush to the dance floor to pull the person out. Yu Wei finally stopped the person, and the two people on the dance floor cooperated perfectly in every dance step. After the song ended, the two walked out of the dance floor together. Yang Wenchu's friends immediately surrounded them. Several people talked and laughed, which was quite lively. Han Chunyang got even angrier when she saw this, and she grabbed Yu Wei's arm and walked towards the two of them. Yu Wei didn't want to pay attention to Yang Wenju, so she pushed him away. Han Chunyang looked at her with a look of disappointment. You are his wife, what are you afraid of? Wenju, who is this? Why don't you introduce her to me? Han Chunyang smiled and looked at Wenxia from the corner of her eyes. She was not as tall or as pretty as Wei Wei. The conversation and laughter stopped abruptly. Hello, I'm Wenxia, Wenshu's cousin. Wenxia extended her hand to her generously. Han Chunyang reluctantly shook her fingertips. Cousin? I was wondering, who is so tactless that she dragged someone else's husband to show off at someone else's birthday party? Chapter 3. Don't even think about it. Wenxia's smile froze. Madam Yu, it's just a dance, it shouldn't be that serious, right? Someone spoke up to help Wenxia out. We are family, so it's not that serious. If it were an outsider, I wouldn't be as good-tempered as I am. Han Chunyang said with a smile, I am also thinking about Miss Wen. With so many eyes watching, if you don't keep a distance from a married man, your reputation will be ruined, and it will be difficult for you to get married in the future. Wenxia said coldly, Madam Yu, don't worry about my affairs. You, child, why are you so rude? Han Chunyang put on an elder's attitude, although your surname is Wen, not Yang, if it gets out, others will say that the Yang family has no family education. Yang Wenshu's face darkened, and Yu Wei touched Han Chunyang's arm, telling her to stop. Han Chunyang patted her hand and looked at Yang Wenju with a smile. Wenju, I heard that your Beiwan project is open for bidding. Yu Wei tugged at Han Chunyang's arm, but Han Chunyang ignored her and continued, we are family, so let your family know about this project and let your father's company win the bid. Yu Wei felt a black screen in front of her eyes. Wenxia chuckled and picked up a glass of red wine from the table beside her. Sorry, my throat is a little uncomfortable. Yang Wenju glanced at Yu Wei with interest, and then said without any expression, companies have to go through the process of bidding. If the information submitted by Yu's family proves that they have the ability, they will of course win the bid. With Yang Wenju here, the Yu family is certainly capable. This child speaks very tactfully. Han Chunyang smiled with satisfaction. Yu Wei took Han Chunyang aside and looked at her helplessly. Didn't I tell you not to mention the project? Wait till when? Han Chunyang looked at her with regret. Yang Wenju is my son-in-law, I'm giving him a chance to be filial to me. Yu Wei couldn't do anything with her. It was already past 11 o'clock at night when the banquet ended. The night was as cold as water, and the light in the carriage was dim. Yang Wenju closed his eyes and frowned slightly. The slender fingertips pressed his temple, bringing the usual fruity fragrance of a woman. Yang Wenju opened his eyes, and she leaned over, the spring light on her chest looming, and with the massage, it was like an addictive poison. Yang Wenju pinched her slender waist. Are you trying to please me? Yu Wei said softly, I know you always keep your private and public life separate, but since my mother has asked you, the Yu family can't afford this project. Yang Wenshu's indifference made Yu Wei want to retreat, but just as she stepped back, Yang Wenju suddenly grabbed her waist and made her sit on him. Yu Wei subconsciously dodged, but couldn't move at all. His slender fingers brushed across her rosy lips. Mrs. Yang, you can't get something for nothing. A trace of confusion flashed in her watery eyes. Yang Wenju moved closer to her and whispered in her ear, is this all the ways that Mrs. Yang can please people? Their warm breath hit her ears, and Yu Wei's cheeks were red. Although they had been married for 3 years and had done intimate things many times, Yang Wenju took the lead every time. She slowly hugged the man's neck and kissed his thin lips, imitating the way he kissed her every time, but the kiss was a little clumsy. The only sound in the quiet car was the two kissing. Finally, the man lost his patience and pulled off her hair accessories, and her long black hair spread out. The man's fingers passed through her hair, and Yu Wei was forced to look up. The delicate kisses fell on her slender white neck, all the way down. When they returned to their villa, Yu Wei's clothes were messy, and Yang Wenju wrapped her in his coat and carried her back to the room. The room was dim, and Yu Wei was floating and sinking, and her consciousness was a little scattered. Only women in places of entertainment need to please men. The man's indifferent voice was like a basin of cold water poured on her face. Yu Wei wanted to push him away, but he grabbed her hand, raised it above her head, and pressed it on the bed. Why is Mrs. Yang so handy, huh? You can't see his eyes in the dark. Yu Wei could imagine the mockery in his eyes. You've drunk too much. How can I give you a chance if I'm not drunk? Yu Wei turned her head away in embarrassment. If you hate me, we can get a divorce. Why do you have to humiliate me again and again? Yu Wei's chin was suddenly pinched, and her face wrinkled in pain. Divorce? Just now, you tried to please me for the Yu family's project, but you want a divorce after saying a few words to you. Yang Wenju looked at her mockingly. I didn't realize that Mrs. Yang was so stubborn. Yu Wei's face was pale. From the club to the birthday party tonight, you treat me like this, don't you want a divorce? Your family forced me to get married. Yang Wenju used force on his fingertips, now you feel unhappy and want a divorce, but you want to push it on me. Tell me, how can people be as greedy as you? Yu Wei looked painful, I didn't. Divorce, don't even think about it. Yang Wenju put his ear close to her, and his voice sounded like hell, you chose this road yourself. As long as I don't let you stop, you have to go on even if you are torn to pieces. Yu Wei closed her eyes, tears sliding down her eyes, no birthday gifts, not even a happy birthday, only disgust in her eyes. It turns out that a respectful husband-wife relationship is just a luxury. The news that Han Chunyang asked Yang Wenju for a project in public at the banquet soon spread like wildfire in the circle. Yang Wenju did not return to the villa for another week. Yu Wei declined all banquet invitations and took care of the flowers and plants in the villa. Best friend Yao Lin called her and asked her out for a drink, saying that she wanted to celebrate her birthday. Yao Lin was a photographer and was on business trips every few days. The two of them met at Jiuqing Bar. I heard that Yang Wenju spent more than 20 million yuan to buy a pair of diamond earrings at an auction in Europe a while ago. Take them out and show them to the sisters. Yu Wei took a sip of wine, he didn't give you anything. He didn't give you anything. Which little bitch did he take the photo for? Yu Wei shook her head, I don't know. Bastard. Yao Lin snorted, if he really has someone outside, you must find good evidence. Skin him when you divorce. Yu Wei laughed at herself. How could she have that ability? Yang Wenju would give her a considerable amount of living expenses every month, and would also arrange for someone to buy her clothes, shoes, bags, and jewelry. She used to think he was considerate, but now she thinks that he just wants to package herself into a delicate Mrs. Yang. She had been living a good life for too long, and she was actually dreaming of having a child and living happily with him. Wei Wei, did I drink too much and have hallucinations? Isn't that your cheap husband? Following Yao Lin's line of sight, Yu Wei saw Yang Wenju standing in front of a booth, with a pair of white hands on his shoulders. Damn, just when he said he had someone outside, he brought the evidence to the door. Yao Lin took out the camera. Yang Wenju picked up the woman's coat and helped the woman up from the booth. The woman fell into his arms, and Yu Wei saw Wenxia's face. Chapter 4 I'll teach you. Yu Wei blocked Yao Lin's camera and said, don't shoot, that's his cousin. Yang Wenju supported Wenxia as they walked toward the door. Wenxia's murmuring voice drifted over, I don't want a blind date. I just want you. 1 year, 2 years, no matter how many years, I can wait for you. You are drunk. The lights in the bar were dim, but his hand on her waist was so dazzling. After the two left, Yao Lin slammed the table in anger, what kind of cousin is Wenxia? She is still waiting, what is she waiting for? Waiting for you to get divorced. Yu Wei blinked her sore eyes and drank the wine in the glass. After drinking, Yu Wei called a designated driver to send Yao Lin home first, and then returned to the villa. She returned to the room and turned on the light. Seeing the man sitting on the chair, Yu Wei was startled. Why didn't you turn on the light? Yang Wenju sneered and asked, is it fun to follow people? Yu Wei looked at him in disbelief, Yang Wenju, I'm not that boring. I just happened to be drinking in the same bar with you guys. Do you think I will believe it? Yu Wei felt annoyed and took off her coat, I don't care whether you believe it or not. She took her pajamas, opened the bathroom door, and was about to close it when she was blocked. Looking at the man's deep eyes, Yu Wei closed the door hard again, but it didn't move at all. Get out of the way, I want to take a shower. Her chin was suddenly pinched and Yu Wei had to look up. Who gave you permission to talk to me like that? Yu Wei thought of the scene of Wenxia in his arms, and her heart was choked. Why don't you teach me, Mr. Yang, how should a wife talk to her husband? Seeing her cold eyes, Yang Wenju resisted the urge to strangle her and pushed her into the bathroom. Okay, I'll teach you. What do you want to do? Yu Wei saw him unbuttoning his shirt and hurriedly stepped back. Yang Wenju stepped forward step by step until Yu Wei had nowhere to retreat, then he took her into his arms. Don't you want me to teach you? Why are you hiding? Get out. First of all, at this time, you should hug me instead of pushing me away. The next morning, Yu Wei saw the strawberry marks on her body and cursed Yang Wenju's elders in her heart. She just choked him a few times, but he was gnawing at her like a dog. How could she go out and meet people? Just then, Han Chunyang called and asked her and Yang Wenju to go back to Yu's house for lunch. Yu Wei naturally knew Han Chunyang's intention, which was nothing more than to confirm the project. Yu Wei agreed, took out a silk scarf from the closet, and returned to Yu's house alone at noon. When Han Chunyang saw her coming back alone, the smile on her face froze. Where's Wenju? He has a social engagement. Yu Wei lied calmly. Han Chunyang poked her head in frustration. Can't you just act a little coquettishly with him? Coax him a little. No. Yu Wei walked in and took off her coat. Han Chunyang followed behind her. What do you know? Men need to be coaxed, especially men like Wenju. Yu Wei didn't respond. Han Chunyang was about to say something, but when she saw the strawberry mark on her neck, she immediately smiled and invited Yu Haixing to eat. A family of 3 sat at the dining table. Han Chunyang kept picking up dishes for Yu Wei. Your father cooks all your favorite dishes, eat more. Yu Wei just focused on eating. Wei Wei, you still need to talk to Wenju about the project. You know Xiaomor just joined the company and is very concerned about this project, and… Mom. Yu Wei interrupted Han Chunyang when she mentioned her brother Yumo. Even if he cares about the project, it depends on whether the Yu family has the ability. Why doesn't the Yu family have this ability? Han Chunyang also frowned. No one can guarantee that the Yu family will win the bid for this project. Yu Wei put down her chopsticks and stood up. I advise you not to hold your hopes too high. I'm full, so I'll leave first. As soon as Yu Wei left, Han Chunyang's eyes immediately turned red. Did we make Wei Wei embarrassed? Otherwise, the project. We, the Yu family, must win the bid for this project. Yu Haixing said firmly, we have already borrowed the money and the factory is under construction. If we don't win the bid, how can we pay it back? Yu Wei drove to a clinic. She sat in the car, looking at the lock on the clinic door, and long-lost memories came flooding back. What do you mean by healing the world? You are just a quack and a charlatan. You have such a dark heart. Do you feel at ease earning the money from others' life-saving money? The ringing of the cell phone brought her back to her senses. Yang Wenju sent her a WeChat message saying that there would be a family dinner at the old house tonight. Yu Wei went back to the villa and changed her clothes. The driver was already waiting downstairs. She got into the car and saw Yang Wenju processing documents on a tablet without even glancing at her. The car stopped outside the Yang family's old house. Yang Wenju finally looked up and glanced at her, but Yu Wei seemed not to see his look and pushed the door and got out of the car. The living room is very lively. Wenxia was sitting next to old Madame Yang. When she saw Yu Wei come in, she stood up and called out with a sweet smile, third sister-in-law. When she caught a glimpse of the mark on Yu Wei's neck, the smile on her face froze. Yang Wenju then walked in and stood beside Yu Wei. Wenxia came back to her senses and called out with a smile, third brother. Yeah. Yang Wenju responded. Yu Wei greeted everyone. An old lady Yang smiled and waved to Yu Wei. Wei Wei, come here quickly. Yu Wei walked over and Wenxia had to give up her seat. Yang Wenju sat on the single sofa beside him. Wenxia had no seat left, so she simply sat directly on the armrest of his sofa. His arm was casually draped over the armrest, close to her, but he made no move to move away. The old lady held Yu Wei's hand and talked a lot. Wenxia lowered her head from time to time to talk to Yang Wenju. Yu Wei felt annoyed and left under the pretext of going to the bathroom. When she got to the bathroom, Yu Wei washed her face with cold water. Are you very proud? Yu Wei turned around and looked at Wenxia. I don't know what you are talking about. Be his wife and go out with him. Wenxia walked to her side, her eyes fell on the mark on her neck that could not be covered by a scarf. Go to bed with him. Yu Wei laughed. You also said that I am his wife, isn't this what I should do? Why? Wenxia laughed mockingly. Because of your tricks, because you used the child to force him to marry you. Yu Wei's figure swayed. She looked at the hatred in Wenxia's eyes and said coldly, even if it wasn't me, it would be someone else. It would be fine if she was a woman of equal status to him, but you. Wenxia gritted her teeth and said, how can you compare to me? Yu Wei looked straight at her and said, no matter if I can beat you or not, I am now the legitimate wife of Yang. Justified. Wenxia laughed sarcastically, can't you see how much he hates you? Yu Wei thought of what Yang Wenju had said and said calmly, instead of belittling me here, you should focus on Yang Wenju. You want me to pay attention to him. If you two are truly in love, he will definitely divorce me for you. Yu Wei said calmly, when that happens, I will never have any complaints. When Sia clenched her palms, why are you pretending? You know that I am with him. Yeah, you know very well that it's impossible for you to be with him. Yu Wei looked at her coldly, why bother yourself? Yu Wei left calmly, and just as she turned the corner, she saw the man leaning against the window. Yang Wenju was wearing a black shirt, with one hand casually resting on the windowsill. When he saw her, he chuckled and said, come here. Chapter 5. The Yu family is going bankrupt. The man's smile did not reach his eyes. Did he hear everything? Yu Wei walked over feeling somewhat guilty. Yang Wenju held her in his arms, his thin lips pressed against her ears, his movements intimate, but his voice cold. Since you can't file for a divorce, you're instigating others to seduce me, huh? Yu Wei turned her head away, I didn't. No. I see you're looking forward to it. Yang Wenju stretched out his hand, carefully traced the shape of her lips, and smiled sarcastically, you want me to file for a divorce so that you can win sympathy and rekindle your old lover. Yu Wei raised her head in surprise, Yang Wenju, what nonsense are you talking about? The next second, her lips were kissed, and his kiss was so overbearing that she didn't give him any room to breathe. When Sia just walked around the corner when she saw two people kissing. She took a step back in disbelief, her heart aching and tears dripping. It turned out that they were so intimate in a place where she couldn't see. After the kiss, Yu Wei was panting. Yang Wenju held her in his arms, looked at the figure that had already walked away, and said coldly, at least I have slept with you for 3 years with all my heart. If another woman comes to you, you have to pretend that you are reluctant to leave me. After the family dinner, the driver drove the two back to the villa, still in silence all their way. When they arrived at the villa, Yu Wei got out of the car and it drove away. For a whole week, Yang Wenju did not return to the villa. Yu Wei enjoyed the quiet time. Apart from watering the flowers and grass, she would go shopping with Yao Lin. Office of the President of Yangshe Group. Li Wan handed the information to Yang Wenju and said respectfully, Mr. Yang, this is the evaluation result of the Beiwan project. There are 3 companies that meet our expectations. Yang Wenju looked through the information and saw that Yu was also in it. His eyes darkened, Yu also meets the requirements. Li Wan quietly wiped the sweat from his forehead. Of course, Yu's is not eligible, but this is your father-in-law's company, who dares to kick it out? Don't worry about your life. Compared to the other 2 companies, Yu's is a little smaller, but ask the project leader to come see me. 3 days later, Yang Group announced the winning bidder. When Yu Wei received Li Wen's call, she was shopping with Yao Lin. Madam, please come to the company. Madam Yu is in the company and refuses to leave. Yu Wei didn't dare to delay and drove directly to the company. Li Wan saw her as if she had seen a savior. Boss Yang is in a meeting, Madam Yu refuses to leave, and won't listen to anyone's advice. I'm afraid Boss Yang will come out soon. Yu Wei naturally knew what he meant. Yu Wei saw Han Chunyang sitting outside the meeting room and went over to pull her. Han Chunyang shook off her hand and said, I won't leave. I will make Yang Wenju give me an explanation today. You come home with me first. Han Chunyang frowned, are you afraid that I will embarrass you? Let's go back to the villa and wait for him, okay? Yu Wei lowered her voice. Han Chunyang turned her head away stubbornly. Not far away, the door of the conference room was opened and Yang Wenju came out first. When Han Chunyang saw him, she immediately rushed over and asked, Yang Wenju, why don't you let the Yu family bid? Yu Wei chased after her and stopped her. Yang Wenju glanced at Li Wan and said, bring him to my office. Han Chunyang pushed Yu Wei away and said, today I want you to tell me in front of everyone why you didn't let the Yu family win the bid. Why do you want to go back on your promise? Behind Yang Wenju were the company's senior executives. They all looked embarrassed, but couldn't help but prick up their ears. Yang Wenju looked indifferent, Mrs. Yu, no one has promised you anything. What do you mean? Are you trying to cheat? Han Chunyang was so angry that her chest heaved violently. You can ask your precious daughter, did I promise you? Yang Wenju glanced at Yu Wei, the bidding process should be followed, and those who are capable will win. Hearing his cold voice, Yu Wei grabbed Han Chunyang's arm and said, Mom, let's go. Whether the Yu family is capable or not is up to you. Han Chunyang looked at him angrily, you just looked down on our Weiwei, you are deliberately making our Yu family look bad. Mom! Yu Wei almost collapsed. Yang Wenshu's expression was still cold, as if he was looking at a stranger. Madam Yu, if you insist on thinking this way, I have nothing to say. I knew it. Han Chunyang laughed in anger. Your old lover is back, and you want to push our Wei Wei away and show your loyalty to her, right? I tell you, it's impossible. Our Wei Wei had a miscarriage because of you. You can't be so heartless. When Yang Wenju heard the word miscarriage, he smiled sarcastically. The inquiring looks from all around made Yu Wei feel cold all over. That's enough. How long are you going to make trouble? Yu Wei grabbed her and said in a trembling voice, come with me. I won't leave. Just when the two were in a stalemate, Han Chuanyen's cell phone rang. She answered the call and her face gradually turned paler. Wei Wei, your dad just fainted and was sent to the hospital. Yu Wei and Han Chunyang rushed to the hospital. Yu Mo was waiting outside the emergency room. When he saw Yu Wei, he was furious. This is all your Yang Wenshu's fault. You've been married to him for so many years, and he refused to let our Yu family take advantage of you. Yu Wei leaned against the wall, buried her face in her hands, unable to utter a word. I don't know how long it took before the doctor came out. The patient is out of danger, but he still needs to rest more and not be stimulated anymore. Yu Wei breathed a sigh of relief. When Han Chunyang heard that Yu Haixing was out of danger, she seemed to faint. Yu Wei hurried forward to support her. Han Chunyang held her hand and cried, Wei Wei, Mom didn't mean to embarrass you. It was Yan Wenju who went too far. Your father had been eyeing this project for a long time. He thought that the project would definitely be in the hands of the Yu family, so he borrowed a lot of money and invested it all. Now the project has failed, all the money has gone down the drain, and our Yu family is going bankrupt. All your father's hard work is gone. Mom, I told you a long time ago that the project is not as easy as you think. Why don't you listen? How could I know that Yang Wenju would be so ruthless? Han Chunyang gritted her teeth, it's all Wenxia's fault. She didn't come back earlier or later, but at this time. Otherwise, the project would definitely be used. Yu Wei knew that it was useless to tell her more, so she asked helplessly, how much do you owe? Han Chunyang held up 3 fingers and said, 300 million. Yu Wei frowned, are you crazy? Even if it is the initial investment in the project, where can so much money be spent all at once? Yu Wei glanced at Yu Mo who was standing aside, and when Han Chunyang followed Yu Haixing to the ward, Yu Wei called Yu Mo to the corner. Did you spend the money? Yu Mo said as a matter of course, it's spent. How much did it cost and where did it go? How much can I spend? I can't remember it anymore. Anyway, the money is gone now. Yu Mo said indifferently, besides, the money is borrowed from Brother Senator. Everyone knows that my brother-in-law and Brother Sen are inseparable. Even if it's for my brother-in-law's sake, he will definitely not ask for the money. Yu Wei's eyes darkened. The Yu family borrowed money from Jiu Ting Sen, so Yang Wenju knew the Yu family's plan from the beginning. Chapter 6. It's better for women to be a little confused. I tell you, you have to move the remaining money separately. Yu Wei said with a cold face. Yu Mo was unconvinced and said, you only know how to act tough with me. Yu Wei looked at him with disappointment and turned away. When Yu Wei returned to the villa, Yang Wenju was holding a video conference in the study. Yu Wei checked the time and cooked him a bowl of hot noodle soup. When she brought it into the study, his meeting had just ended. Looking at the noodles on the table, Yang Wenju leaned back in his chair casually. Does this count as a slap in the face followed by a sweet treat? I apologize to you on behalf of my mother. Why don't you tell me what you want to do? The Yu family borrowed money from Jiu Ting Sen, but the project didn't win the bid, so they definitely can't pay it back for a while. Yu Wei said calmly, I want you to help talk to him and see if they can delay the repayment for a while. Doing business is not charity. Everything is subject to the contract. Yang Wenju looked at her expressionlessly. Instead of asking me for help, why don't you take a look at the contract? Although Yu Wei didn't hold out much hope, she was still a little embarrassed when she heard him reject her without hesitation. Did you know that the Yu family was raising funds a long time ago? So what if you know? Yang Wenju looked at her with a smile, and said mockingly, didn't you already know the strength of the Yu family? He obviously knew everything, but he just let it go and didn't even give any reminders. Could it be that in his eyes, there was not even the slightest bit of affection between them as husband and wife? Yu Wei didn't want to bore herself anymore and got up and left the study. Yang Wenju stood up, looked at the steaming noodles, picked them up, and poured them into the trash can beside him without hesitation. The news that you had not won the bid and was about to go bankrupt spread like wildfire. Yu Wei asked Yu Mo to contact several old clients of US company, and Yu Mo directly arranged for them to come to Golden Years. When Yu Wei arrived, there was a young woman sitting next to each of the men, and Yu Mo was also holding one in his arms. Yu Wei glared at him, and Yu Mo touched his nose guiltily. Someone toasted Yu Wei, and Yu Wei politely said, "I don't drink." The man's expression immediately changed. "It seems like we can't reach an agreement today." Yu Mo hurried over to get the wine. "My sister can't drink much, I'll drink this for her." The man blocked his hand and asked, "Mrs. Yang, are you looking down on me?" Yu Wei knew that she had to drink the wine today, so she picked up the glass and shook it. "How dare I look down on Mr. Wang? I'll drink this glass of wine, Mr. Wang, please do as you please. Mrs. Yang is really nice." Then several people took turns to toast Yu Wei. Yu Wei responded calmly, but her stomach was churning. She left the box on the pretext of going to the bathroom and leaned against the corridor. Her stomach ached so much that beads of sweat broke out on her forehead. The door of the box opposite was open from the inside, and someone came out talking on the phone. Through the crack in the door, she saw Wen-Sia wearing a pink dress and a birthday hat on her head, making a wish devoutly. A group of people around were clapping and singing happy birthday to her, and the atmosphere was very warm. Yang Wenju was standing beside her. He was wearing a clean white shirt. He was singing and looking at her tenderly. After Wen-Sia made her wish, she suddenly stood on tiptoe and kissed the man on the cheek. The door of the box happened to be closed, isolating everything. Will he dodge? Yu Wei thought vaguely, her stomach churning again. It turns out that he would make a special trip to celebrate someone's birthday. It turns out that he would sing happy birthday to someone. It turns out that his eyes could be so gentle. Yu Wei staggered to the bathroom and washed her face. Two women putting on makeup in front of a mirror. "Have you heard that Yang Wenju is here tonight to celebrate the birthday of Miss Yang's sixth family, and ordered 999 red roses for her? The roses were all airlifted in. Oh, and he also customized a diamond necklace for her. How romantic. Where does a brother give his sister red roses? What brother and sister? Don't you know? This sixth miss is Yang Wenju's first love. Isn't Yang Wenju already married? How many men nowadays don't cheat? Do you think his wife doesn't know? Just turn a blind eye. It's better for women to be a little ignorant." Yu Wei leaned her hands on the marble countertop, looked at the pale face in the mirror, and smiled at herself. Indeed, isn't it good to be a little confused? After a long while, she returned to the box. Someone else came to toast, and Yu Mo hurried over to stop them. "My sister really can't drink anymore. If she drinks until something bad happens, my brother-in-law will be heartbroken." "Well, have one last drink, just one," the man continued to persuade. If Yang Wenju really cared about his wife, how could he not even give the Yu family a project? This group of people was sure of this, so they dared to be so presumptuous tonight. Yu Wei thought of the scene where Wen-Sia kissed Yang Wenju, took the wine glass and drank it all. "My stomach started to hurt again, as if someone was cutting it with a knife." It was already past 1 in the morning when the drinking party ended. Yu Wei was sweating all over from the pain. She stood up with difficulty and someone supported her. "Mrs. Yang, do you want me to take you there?" Yu Wei looked around and found that Yu Mo had already walked out of the box with a woman in his arms. Yu Wei shook her head, "No need. Mrs. Yang, please don't be polite to me." The man put his arm around her shoulders and led her out of the box. Yu Wei was in so much pain that she could hardly stand. The man was very strong and she couldn't break free at all. "Please let me go. Why are you pretending to be so reserved?" The man approached her and whispered, "Everyone knows that you used tricks to get into Yang Wenju's bed back then. As long as you sleep with me today, I promise that none of these people will cause trouble for you. Get out of here." Yu Wei tried to push him away, but she didn't have any strength at all. "You won't be willing to let me go after a while?" The man grabbed her hand and moved closer to her in an obscene manner. Yu Wei turned her head away in disgust. "Don't touch me." Bang! With a loud bang, the man was knocked to the ground. Yu Wei raised her head and saw Yang Wenju standing in front of her with a sullen face. As soon as the man saw Yang Wenju, he rolled over and started crawling. Boss Yang, it's a misunderstanding, it's all a misunderstanding, it's her, she seduced me. She seduced you? Yang Wenju sneered, his eyes falling on Yu Wei. Tell me, how did she seduce you? She. Yang Wenju stepped on the man's hand, and the man wailed and could not utter another word. Several bodyguards stepped forward and carried the man away. The man screamed in fear, Boss Yang, I was wrong. I won't dare to do it again. Yu Wei bit her lips and her body swayed. Yang Wenju walked up to her and said coldly, you are really getting bolder and bolder. How dare you cheat on me? Yu Wei shook her head, I didn't. Yang Wenju pinched her chin and said, you are really trying to disgust me. Yu Wei shook her head weakly again, grabbed his arm, and finally couldn't hold on any longer and fell into his arms. Chapter 7 I'll let you get off. Looking at her pale little face, Yang Wenju cursed softly and picked her up. Yu Wei looked at his tense face, the tears she had been holding back finally fell, and she buried her head in his arms. Yu Mo was waiting for the car at the door. When he turned around, he saw Yang Wenju carrying Yu Wei out. He sobered up immediately and asked, what happened to my sister? Yang Wenju didn't stop, just glanced at him coldly, you're here too. Yu Mo suddenly felt guilty. He pushed the woman in his arms away and followed anxiously, complaining in his heart, why are you looking at me like that? It's because you didn't give the project to the Yu family. Otherwise, why would my sister have to drink with those old men? The driver had already opened the car door, and Yang Wenju directly carried Yu Wei into the car. Yu Mo directly opened the passenger door, sat in and fastened his seat belt. Yang Wenju's face darkened. Yu Wei curled up in his arms like a kitten. She was shaking all over because of the pain. Yang Wenju asked the driver to drive the car and put his coat on her. The coat carried the man's body temperature and her familiar scent. Yu Wei couldn't help but squeeze into his arms again. Yang Wenju noticed her movements and sneered, do you feel uncomfortable now? Yu Wei looked up at him. Her palm-sized face was completely bloodless, and her hair was soaked. She hummed softly, it hurts. Yang Wenju looked at her misty eyes and felt inexplicably irritated. He held her head against his chest and scolded her coldly, you don't know how high the sky is or how deep the earth is. Although his actions were not gentle, listening to his strong heartbeat did not seem so painful. The car sped through the dark night. Yu Wei was half asleep and half awake because of the pain. Yang Wenju leaned back in his chair with his eyes closed. The flickering light shone on his stern profile, revealing a sense of fatigue. A rapid phone ring interrupted the silence in the car. Yang Wenju rubbed the corners of his eyes and answered the phone. The sound of a woman sobbing could be heard faintly from the microphone of the mobile phone. Before she could raise her head, Yang Wenju had already sat up straight, stopped the car. The driver quickly pulled over. Yu Mo was anxious, why did you stop the car for no reason? Didn't you see that my sister was almost dying of pain? Take your sister out of the car and take a taxi to the hospital. Yang Wenju ordered coldly. Yu Wei's whole body stiffened, and the air around her seemed to turn cold instantly. Yu Mo turned his head and looked at him in disbelief. Yang Wenju, are you crazy? Your wife is in so much pain right now, and you asked her to take a taxi to the hospital. It's past 1 in the morning, and you can't get a taxi in less than half an hour. Yang Wenju looked at him coldly, get out of the car. Yu Mo was so angry that he wanted to curse, but he stubbornly refused to move. Yu Wei forced herself to sit up straight, her coat slipping off. She glanced at Yu Mo and said in a weak and pale voice, get out of the car. Yu Wei. Yu Wei gritted her teeth and said, I'll ask you to get off the car. Yu Mo looked at her deeply, then got out of the car reluctantly. Yu Wei took a deep breath and opened the car door while enduring the pain. She stepped out of the car, feeling so fragile that she seemed like she would be blown down by the wind at any time. Bang! The car door closed. The black sedan quickly merged into the traffic without a moment's hesitation. Yu Wei's legs went limp, as if she had lost all her strength in an instant. Yu Mo hurriedly supported her. Yu Wei, is there something wrong with your brain? That call must have been made by that Wenxia, why are you pretending to be magnanimous? If you don't get out of the car today, I don't believe he can throw you out again. Yu Wei held his arm and thought self-deprecatingly, if she really refused to get off the car, Yang Wenju would indeed throw her out, so why should she make herself miserable? Yu Mo looked at her with a look of dismay, have I never seen a wife like you? You cry, make a scene, and even threaten to hang yourself, don't you? If you don't fight or compete, men will only think you are stupid and ask for more. A cold wind blew, and Yu Wei shivered with cold, as if the temperature in the car had never existed. Yu Mo cursed while waving his hand to stop a taxi, and finally got one after more than 10 minutes. After going to the hospital for a checkup, it was found to be acute gastroenteritis. After a bottle of drip, Yu Wei's face finally regained some color. Seeing that she was no longer upset, Yu Mo lay down on the sofa and complained to her, "We are twins, boy and girl. How come you are not half as smart as me?" Yu Wei turned over, not wanting to pay attention to him. She thought of something and warned him, "Don't tell Mom about this." Yu Mo snorted coldly, "You tell me. I want her to live a few more years." Yu Wei looked at her silent phone, a little absent-minded. Yang Wenju didn't even call her. The next morning, messages in the WeChat group kept ringing. Yu Wei took the phone, opened WeChat, and scrolled up layer by layer. Fuck, when Sia committed suicide, is this true? In her own apartment, she committed suicide by slitting her wrists while lying on the 999 red roses Yang Wenju gave her. How do you know? Someone filmed Yang Wenju carrying her to the hospital for emergency treatment. His clothes were stained with blood. As if afraid that his words were not convincing enough, the man posted another photo. In the photo, Yang Wenju was only wearing a white shirt and holding Wenxia. Because he walked too fast, a blur appeared in the photo, but one could still tell from his side profile that he was very anxious. It turns out that this is what he looks like when he is anxious. No wonder he abandoned her without hesitation. Yu Mo was also in the group, and he had obviously seen the news. Damn it, Wenxia was too harsh on me. Mom was right, this woman is obviously not a good person to deal with. She has no good intentions when she returned to China. What Wensai Yan is thinking is not important, what is important is Yang Wenshu's attitude. Although she never expected to have a deep love with him, she could not tolerate him cheating on her. Yu Mo looked at her pale face and snatched her phone away. I'll call Yang Wenju now and ask him to come over here. Yu Wei's face darkened, give me the phone. You are his wife and you are in the hospital now. Shouldn't he be guarding you? Just use your toes to guess that he must be with that Wenxia now. Yu Mo looked righteous, found Yang Wenshu's number and dialed it. If you dare to beat him, don't recognize me as your sister anymore. Who have I been waiting for since last night? Yu Mo saw that she was silent with a stern face, and he was so angry that his teeth itched. He cut off the call and threw the phone away. Who the hell cares about you? Yu Mo left angrily. Yu Wei was relieved instead. She couldn't get Yang Wenju to come over with a phone call. She just didn't want Yu Mo to be embarrassed with her. Near noon, Yu Mo came back with a stern face, carrying food. He threw a bowl of white porridge to Yu Wei, and then he put a lot of plates on the table and ate with relish. Yu Wei watched him eat with gusto. The porridge in her hand lost its taste even more. She couldn't help but scold him, childish. For 5 consecutive days, Yang Wenju did not show up. On the day of discharge, Yu Mo went to help her with the discharge procedures. Yu Wei was waiting in the lobby and saw a group of people coming from afar. Chapter 8 I Won't Let You Go. Wenxia stood in the middle of the crowd. Her face was pale and her right wrist was wrapped in a white bandage. She looked so fragile that she seemed like she would be blown down by the wind at any time. Yang Wenju was standing on her left. It turned out that Wenxia was also hospitalized here, so he should have been in the hospital as well, but he didn't even come to see her. The group also saw Yu Wei and stopped. When Wang Shuman, the eldest lady of the Yang family, saw Yu Wei, her face darkened and she walked over. Par. A loud slap hit Yu Wei's face. There was a burning pain on her cheek. Yu Wei covered her face, feeling a little dazed. Everyone was shocked by Wang Shuman's actions. What do you want? She has been hiding abroad for 3 years. Wang Shuman's eyes were red, and she gritted her teeth and said, she just returned to China, and you have to force her like this. Do you have to force her to death to be happy? What do you want to do, woman? Yu Mo was holding the discharge form in his hand. He saw Yu Wei being slapped from a distance. He rushed over, dragged Yu Wei behind him, and pointed at Wang Shuman, don't think I don't hit women. Apologize to my sister. Mom, this matter has nothing to do with my third sister-in-law, don't be like this. Wenxia chased after her and grabbed Wang Shuman's arm. Yu Wei couldn't help but glance at Yang Wenju. There was no expression on his face, as if the person being beaten was a stranger. What on earth was she expecting? He didn't even care about her being in the hospital, so why would he care about this slap? Yu Wei pushed Yu Mo away and looked at Wen Shumen calmly. I don't know what you are talking about. Are you still pretending in front of me? Wang Shumen looked at her angrily. If you and your mother hadn't gone to the company and made a scene, saying all sorts of nonsense, how could the old lady have arranged for Xie to get married? I see. Did he also think she did it on purpose? What does it have to do with my mother? Yu Mo said, what kind of daughter have you raised? Don't you know? If they weren't flirting with each other all day long, afraid that others wouldn't know. Yu Mo. Yu Wei's face darkened. Yu Mo snorted angrily and turned his head away. Yu Wei looked at Wang Shumen. My mother did go to the company to look for Yang Wenju, but I don't know why this matter reached Grandma's ears. You still dare to quibble? Wang Shumen raised his hand again. Yu Mo grabbed her wrist and said, you're still here, right? You think I'm dead? Wang Shumen cried out in pain. When Xia hurriedly grabbed Yu Mo's wrist, let go of my mother. Get out of here. Yu Mo waved his hand. When Xia, who looked frail to begin with, was pushed by him and fell to the ground. Yang Wenju took a step forward and supported her. When Xia looked at him pitifully, I'm fine. Yu Mo's mouth twitched. No way, he didn't even use any strength at all. Yang Wenju helped the man up and looked at Yu Mo coldly. Let go. Let her go so she can slap my sister again. Yu Mo looked at him unhappily. Didn't you see how hard she slapped my sister just now? There were 5 clear fingerprints on Yu Wei's fair cheek, which showed that Wang Shumen had used all his strength in that slap. I told you to let go. Yang Wenshu's face was gloomy. Although Yu Mo was a bit muddlehead, he was still a little afraid of his brother-in-law and reluctantly let go. Yu Wei said coldly, if Auntie thinks this is a quibble, we can go and ask Grandma why she arranged for Wen Xia to get married. Wang Shumen rubbed his wrist and looked at her in disbelief. You are so good, Yu Wei, do you think I am afraid of you just because you used the old lady to pressure me? You slapped me because you are my elder, didn't you? Yu Wei let go of her hand and looked at Wen Xia. The diamond necklace on her neck was a little dazzling. I can tolerate this slap, but I can't tolerate being slapped with dirty water. Yu Wei turned and left, and Yu Mo followed her. Wen Xia looked at her back and gritted her teeth secretly. Yang Wenju looked at the driver beside him and said, send the first lady and the 6th lady back to the old house. Wen Xia's body swayed, and Wang Shumen hurriedly supported her. Xia, what's wrong with you? Wen Xia's face was pale, and she looked like she might collapse at any moment. I'm fine. Yang Wenju paused for a moment, but finally held her. Wen Xia grabbed his arm and looked up. Her watery eyes were filled with mist, and her tone was a little stubborn. Yang Wenju, I won't let you go. Arriving at the hospital entrance, Yu Mo looked inside again. This Yang Wenju is really something. It's okay for him to let you take a taxi when you were admitted to the hospital, but when you were discharged from the hospital, he actually stayed with that woman. Yu Wei stretched out her hand to him. Give me the car keys. What? I'll drive back by myself. Yu Mo handed her the car keys and said, why are you driving back by yourself? I find you annoying. Yu Wei took the key and left in big strides. Do you think I'm annoying? Yu Mo snorted. Good intentions are really not rewarded. After finding an online taxi, Yu Mo squatted in a flower bed and smoked a cigarette. Before he finished his cigarette, he saw Yang Wenju helping Wen Xia out of the hospital lobby, and then helped her carefully into the car. He ignored his sick wife and tried to be attentive to other women. His attentiveness is really infuriating. Yang Wenju had his back to him, so he couldn't see Yang Wenshu's expression. He could only see Wen Xia's eyes that seemed to contain a myriad of emotions. Yu Mo put out his cigarette. It turned out to be a vixen. Look at her position. With Yu Wei's stubbornness, it won't be long before the position of Mrs. Yan will be replaced by someone else. It seems that he still needs to take action. Yu Wei returned to the villa and took a shower first. Han Chunyan called her and said that Jiu Tingsen had agreed not to take back the Yu family's shares for the time being and gave them 1 year to repay the loan. Yang Wenju should give a slap in the face and then a sweet date. In the afternoon, there was a call from the old house, and the old lady asked her to come over for dinner, but Yu Wei refused on the grounds that she was not feeling well. Unexpectedly, the old lady personally brought her food at the evening banquet. When old Madame Yang saw her, she immediately touched her face distressedly. Wei Wei, how come you have become so thin in just a few days? Did Wenju wrong you? Yu Wei shook her head, but her eyes were a little red. You are just like your grandfather. You like to keep everything to yourself. If you keep it to yourself for a long time, you will get sick. Old Madame Yang looked at her gently. Don't you always tell Grandma that you need to keep a good mood to stay healthy? Thinking of Grandpa, Yu Wei threw herself into Madame Yang's arms. Grandma, I'm fine. Glancing at the red marks on her face, old Madame Yang frowned and made a phone call, calling Yang Wenju back to the villa. Let me ask you, was it you who slapped Wei Wei on the face? Chapter 9. This is my bottom line. Yang Wenju did not respond. Madame Yang glared at him. Do you want me to check it myself? Grandma, no. I bumped into her by accident. Yang Wenju said first. Yu Wei fell silent. He was planning to keep it a secret for Wen Shuman. Old Madame Yang was so angry that she slapped him hard. I am old, but I am not so old that my eyesight is blurry. How could I accidentally beat you into this state? Why don't I accidentally slap you too? Yang Wenju said sincerely, Grandma, I was wrong. I will never do it again. Madame Yang looked at him unhappily. You didn't hit me, why are you apologizing to me? Yang Wenju hesitated for a moment and looked at Yu Wei. Wife, I was wrong, can you forgive me? In the past 3 years, the two have performed many loving scenes in front of the old lady and have long been familiar with it. However, Yu Wei is not so willing to cooperate this time. You need to be sincere when asking for forgiveness. Old Madame Yang looked at him with dissatisfaction. You are not allowed to go anywhere for these 3 days. Just stay at home and serve Wei Wei. When Wei Wei is satisfied and forgives you, you can go out again. Madame Yang left after saying a few words. Yang Wenju looked at her and said sarcastically, when will you come up with something new? What else can you do besides looking for your grandmother to play the victim? Did I let Wen Shuman slap me? Yu Wei asked coldly, did I ask you to take the slap for her? The gate is right there. You can leave anytime you want. No one will stop you. Seeing her tense expression, Yang Wenju walked up to her and said, it's rare. It turns out that Mrs. Yang also has a temper. Because I am a human being, not a pet that you can summon and dismiss at will. Yu Wei didn't look at him, turned around and went upstairs. She didn't turn on the light and got straight into bed. I don't know how long it took, but when Yu Wei was half asleep, someone turned on the bedside lamp and touched her face. Yu Wei waved the man's hand away. Yang Wenju, I'm not in the mood now. The man said nonchalantly, women often say one thing and mean another. They say no, but actually they want it so badly in their hearts. Yu Wei was so angry that she sat up and saw Yang Wenju in pajamas, holding ointment in his hand, looking at her leisurely. Yu Wei's cheeks turned red instantly. She turned her face away. Is it fun to play tricks on people? I'm just stating the facts. Yu Wei was too lazy to pay attention to him. She pulled the quilt over and wanted to continue sleeping with her head covered. Come and apply the medicine. Yang Wenju said hoarsely, or, do what you want to do. What did she mean by what she wanted to do? How could this man be so shameless? Yu Wei had no choice but to come to his side and turned her face away. Yang Wenju dipped his fingertips into some ointment and rubbed it onto the red marks on her cheeks bit by bit. Yu Wei was wearing a lotus pink suspender nightgown, which was made of smooth satin. As she leaned sideways, her chest was exposed. Yang Wenju's movements were slow, but Yu Wei felt itchy and wanted to move. Don't move. Noticing his hoarse voice, Yu Wei couldn't help but look up at him, then lowered her head following his gaze. Seeing everything clearly, Yu Wei's face flushed and she quickly covered her chest. Rogue. Rogue. Yang Wenju lifted her chin with his fingertips. When did Madame Yang become so pure? Yu Wei pushed his hand away, took the ointment, turned her back, and said, I'll apply it myself. Yang Wenju hugged her from behind. Then I can just free my hands to do what Madame Yang wants to do. Yu Wei thought of the excruciating pain all the way to the hospital, and her eyes dimmed a little. She held his restless hand and said, I'm not feeling well. He placed delicate kisses on her neck. Are you feeling unwell physically or mentally? Do you see any difference? Of course there is a difference. Yang Wenju kissed her behind the ear again. If you are not feeling well, I won't force you, but if you are not feeling well in your heart, then just bear with it. After all, I have also endured it for 3 years, right? So he had been enduring it for the 3 years he had been married to her. Yang Wenju, you don't allow me to file for divorce, and I don't allow you to cheat on me. This is my bottom line. Yang Wenju pressed her down and smiled sarcastically. Mrs. Yang's bottom line is really low. Yang Wenju stayed in the villa for 3 consecutive days. Except for returning to his bedroom at night, he spent most of his time working in the study. It was so quiet that it seemed as if he didn't exist. Yu Wei was fiddling with the flowers and plants in the backyard and studying cooking at the same time. Han Chunyang sent someone to deliver fish soup to the villa, and even called her to remind her, Wei Wei, I went to Wenju company to cause trouble because I was impulsive. This fish soup is my apology to him. Please help me serve it to him. Yu Wei was not very willing when she thought of the man's dominance at night. But it was indeed a bit excessive for my mother to cause trouble at the company before. Yu Wei thought about it and decided to heat up the fish soup, fill a bowl and bring it to the second floor. She had just walked around the corner of the stairs when Yang Wenju suddenly rushed over. He walked so fast and hurriedly that Yu Wei had no time to dodge, and all the hot soup spilled on the back of her hand. Bang! The porcelain bowl fell to the ground and broke into pieces. Yu Wei didn't care about the pain and chased after him. Yang Wenju, where are you going? The only response she got was the man's back getting farther and farther away. Yu Wei looked at the back of her hand, which was getting redder and redder. The pain seemed to spread from the back of her hand to her heart. She ran back to her room, took out the burn ointment and applied it, but the back of her hand still hurt badly. In the afternoon, Yu Wei was called back to the old house. Wang Shuman was sitting in the living room with red eyes from crying, and a group of people surrounded her. Seeing Yu Wei, Wang Shuman immediately rushed over and grabbed her hand. Yu Wei, I was wrong, I beg you, please let Xie go. As long as you let her come back alive, I promise to send her abroad, away from you and Wenju. Yu Wei's hand was burned, and being grabbed by Wang Shuman was so painful that she frowned in pain. I'll kneel down for you. I beg you, okay? Yu Wei finally couldn't bear it anymore and pulled her hand back. Wang Shuman was just pretending, but when Yu Wei pulled her hand back, she lost her support and fell to the ground with one leg. Yu Wei hurried to help her up, but Dao Jing, the fourth wife of the Yang family, rushed over, calmly pushed Yu Wei's hand away, and supported Wang Shuman. Yu Wei, don't rely on the old lady's favor to act lawless. How dare you ask your aunt to kneel down to you? I don't. Wang Shuman cried until her eyes were red. Yu Wei, as long as you tell me Xieya's whereabouts, I won't care about anything. Please. Yu Wei shook her head. Wen Xia's affairs have nothing to do with me. Wang Shuman burst into tears again after hearing this, and Dao Jing comforted her. Okay, sister-in-law, Wenju is now using all his connections to find Xieya, and I believe that Xieya's whereabouts will be known soon. You said Xieya just returned to China. Who could she have offended? Who is so cruel and crazy? Dao Jing glanced at Yu Wei and said sarcastically, after Xieya returns to China, whoever she affects the most will be the one. Sister-in-law, don't worry too much. With Wenju here, no matter who it is, Wenju will seek justice for Xieya. Chapter 10. Did you kidnap the person? The Yang family members came back one after another, but there was still no news of Wen Xia. Old Madam Yang would spend 1 week every month living in a temple, eating vegetarian food and chanting Buddhist scriptures, and she happened to be away from the old house. The Yang family did not dare to disturb her or call the police. After all, it concerned Wen Xia's reputation. The effect of the ointment on Yu Wei's hand disappeared, and the back of her hand began to hurt again, as if it was burning. She and Yang Wenju also had a room in the old house, so she simply went back to her room and rinsed the back of her hand with cold water. Thinking of something, Yu Wei called Han Chunyang and asked her what she was busy with recently. What else can I do? I can stay at home and serve your father. By the way, did Wenju drink the fish soup? Yu Wei responded vaguely. That's good. Han Chunyang suddenly lowered her voice. Wei Wei, I heard that Wen Xia is missing. Is it true? Fake. Han Chunyang was a little disappointed. I knew it was a rumor. Although it's not right to think so, if she hadn't suddenly returned to China, how could Yang Wenju not even give the Yu family a project? It would be great if she really disappeared. Mom. Isn't this just a thought? Wen Xia is the 6th daughter of the Yang family. How many people in the whole empire dare to risk their lives to kidnap her? It's not like I think my life is too long. Yu Wei hung up the phone and rinsed the back of her hands with water. She put everyone's words together and her heart sank a little bit. She called Yu Mo, and the call went through, but no one answered. Yu Wei had a bad feeling and tried a few more times. Until the evening, no one answered Yu Mo's phone call, and Yu Wei felt a little uneasy. There was a sudden commotion downstairs. Yu Wei put away her phone and hurried downstairs, only to see Yang Wenju carrying Wenxia into their hall. Wenxia was wearing his coat and had her head buried in his arms. Her hair was disheveled, and there were signs of injury on her exposed cheek. If you looked closely, you could see that she was trembling. Wang Shuman almost fainted when she saw it, but fortunately Dao Jing supported her in time. My Xia. Who is so cruel? Is Xia okay? Do you want to call Dr. Liu over? Dao Jing said as she started to look for the servant to call the family doctor. Yang Wenju had a gloomy face and walked upstairs carrying someone. There was blood on his shirt, which was shocking. The people around him had different expressions. Wang Shuman followed. Mom, help me turn on the water. I want to take a bath. When Sia's voice was hoarse and her eyes were empty, like a rag doll that had lost its soul. Wang Shuman couldn't stop her tears from falling. She wiped them away hastily. Okay, Mom will go get you some water. Yang Wenshu's gaze suddenly swept over, and Yu Wei met his icy gaze. She felt cold all over, with only the back of her hand feeling burning. Yang Wenju carried Wenxia upstairs. The phone vibrated. Yu Wei came to her senses and walked to the side to answer it. Han Chuanyan's crying voice came over. Wei Wei, come to the hospital quickly. Xiaomo is almost beaten to death. Yu Wei's heart sank. She drove to the hospital without delay. Outside the surgical ward, Han Chunyang was talking to the doctor. Seeing Yu Wei was like a life-saving straw. She grabbed Yu Wei's arm and cried as she said, Wei Wei, Xiaomo was almost beaten to death by Yang Wenju. You must seek justice for him. Yu Wei asked calmly, what's going on? I heard from company employees that at around 10 o'clock this morning, Yang Wenju suddenly went crazy and took Xiamor away from the company. More than an hour ago, I received a call from the hospital saying that Xiamor was injured and thrown into the hospital. When I arrived at the hospital, Han Chunyang said, she was already crying. Yu Wei entered the ward. Although she was mentally prepared, she was still shocked when she saw Yu Mo lying on the bed with a bandage on his head, steel plates fixed on his arms and legs, and bruises all over his face. His original appearance could not be seen at all. Mom, water. Yu Mo's voice was rough and hoarse. Yu Wei filled a glass of water for him and put a straw in it. Yu Mo felt a little guilty when he saw Yu Wei. Did you kidnap that person? Yu Mo didn't even drink the water and just closed his eyes. Wei Wei, who did you kidnap? Han Chunyang looked at Yu Wei anxiously, then she looked at Yu Mo, and then she thought of something and asked in a low voice, did you kidnap Wenxia? Yu Mo was in so much pain that he couldn't utter a word. Han Chunyang wanted to hit him, but seeing him like this, she couldn't bear to do it. She could only pat the bed hard and said, how can you be so brave? Yu Wei asked coldly, besides kidnapping her, what else did you do to her? Hearing this, Yu Mo glared at her and used up all his remaining strength. What can I do to her? Am I that kind of person? Damn it, he just wanted to scare that woman and make her stay away from other people's husbands. As a result, he was tricked by that woman. She was so cruel to him and made him suffer so badly. Seeing her like that, Yang Wenju almost lost his life. Yu Wei looked at him coldly. Let me ask you again, besides kidnapping her, what else did you do to her? Yu Mo closed his eyes and squeezed out two words, no. Yes. Han Chunyang asked worriedly, really? Yu Mo turned his head away, unable to utter a word due to the pain. Han Chunyang wiped the tears from her face. Even if Xiamor kidnapped Wenxia, he didn't do anything to her. Would Yang Wenju be so cruel? Xiamor is his brother-in-law. Which brother-in-law would be so cruel to his brother-in-law? Yu Wei said coldly, Mom, you are still defending him at this time. He is breaking the law, do you know? Han Chunyang hesitated and said, with you here, will the Yang family call the police to arrest Xiamo? Yu Wei thought of Yang Wenshu's gloomy expression. Even though the Yang family didn't call the police, it didn't mean that Yu Mo wouldn't go to jail. The more Han Chunyang thought about it, the more scared she became. Wei Wei, quickly find a way to save Xiamor. Xiamor is doing this just to vent your anger. Yu Wei rushed back to the old house. She walked to the door of Wenxia's room and was about to knock when Yang Wenju came out, took her to the side hall and threw something to her. Yu Wei caught it and found it was Yu Mo's phone. Yang Wenju looked at her coldly. Why don't you explain to me, Madam Yang, what is the purpose of these 15 phone calls? Yu Wei didn't know how to start for a moment. Or, should I ask you, who is the mastermind between the two of you? Yu Wei's face turned pale, and she said hurriedly, I didn't know that Yu Mo kidnapped Wenxia. You pretend to be generous on the surface, but you use such dirty tricks behind the scenes. Yang Wenju looked at her coldly. You are really the same as 3 years ago, pretending to be indifferent to the world, but you want everything in your heart. Yang Wenju, you can't slander me like this without any evidence. Yang Wenju sneered, you have a good brother who refused to betray you even when he was almost beaten to death. Yu Wei thought of Yu Mo's miserable condition, and her voice trembled. Yang Wenju, even if you want to teach him a lesson, do you have to be so cruel? Chapter 11. Xia needs rest. Is it cruel? Yang Wenju's face darkened. Compared to what Xia has gone through, this is nothing. Yes, he cared so much about Wenxia. Seeing Wenxia's expression, he didn't take Yu Mo's life. He was already showing mercy. Yang Wenju, whether you believe it or not, I didn't know about this. Yu Wei said helplessly, I called Yu Mo only because I know him, and I was afraid that he would do something stupid to vent his anger on me. To let you vent your anger? You mean it's Xia's fault? Yang Wenju said with a sullen face. Yu Wei shook her head, that's not what I meant. This is Yu Mo's fault. The Yu family can compensate Wenxia. Compensation? Yang Wenju laughed mockingly, Mrs. Yang is really rich. Instead of coming to the Yang family, you might as well find him a better lawyer and get him sentenced to fewer years. The Yang family wants to call the police. What do you think? Yu Wei anxiously grabbed his arm and said, Yang Wenju, for the sake of our relationship as husband and wife, can you please ask them not to call the police first? Yang Wenju looked at her hand with red marks, his eyes darkened, and he pushed her away. He did not refuse, but he did not agree either. He just said coldly, don't go back to the old house these 2 days. Wei doesn't want to see you. Looking at the man's indifferent back, Yu Wei had to give up the idea of looking for Wenxia and rushed back to their hospital overnight. After the effect of the painkiller wore off, Yu Mo cried out in pain while Han Chuanyan's eyes were swollen from crying. Yu Wei sat on a bench outside the ward, looking up, tears of heartache falling helplessly. Would Yang Wenju spare Yu Mo for the sake of their relationship? She had no confidence at all. The next morning, Yu Haixing rushed to the hospital with a sullen face. Han Chunyang stood up hurriedly and tidied her hair. Why are you here? You just recovered. It's not good to be exposed to the cold wind. Such a big thing happened, and you dare to hide it from me. Yu Haixing glanced at Yu Mo and his body swayed. Yu Wei hurriedly supported him, Dad, don't be angry first. Yu Haixing pointed at Yu Mo and said in a trembling voice, You little bastard. It's okay for you to act foolishly on weekdays, but how can you be so bold as to do such a heinous thing? Yu Mo looked away guiltily, and Han Chunyang said distressfully, The child is already like this, so please stop talking about him. You're still protecting him. If you hadn't spoiled him since he was a child, he wouldn't be so lawless. Yu Haixing said gloomily, Come with me to the Yang family to apologize now. Yu Wei thought of Wang Shuman and was worried about the two of them going there, so she called Yao Lin to come to the hospital to take care of Yu Mo, and she also went there. 3 people walked into the Yang family's living room carrying a bunch of supplements. Wang Shuman just came downstairs to serve soup to Wenxia. When she saw the Yu family, she was immediately furious and said in a stern voice, How dare you come? Sister-in-law, it was you who failed to educate his son properly, causing him to make such a big mistake. Today I came here specially to apologize to Xia on behalf of my bastard son. Apologize? Wang Shuman thought of Wenxia's pale face and gritted her teeth and said, I think you are here to see if my daughter has been hurt enough by you. Han Chunyang wanted to say something, but Yu Haixing grabbed her arm and said, I understand how you feel, sister-in-law. What can you understand? Wang Shuman's voice trembled. When she saw the shocking wounds on Wei's body and the bruises of varying sizes on her body, she wanted to kill someone. There's no need for your hypocritical apology. I won't accept it. Wang Shuman said as he strode forward, quickly grabbed the gift boxes from the people and threw them out the door, Take these garbage and get out of here. Yu Haixing was weak to begin with, and he almost fell down when she pulled him. Han Chunyang hurriedly supported him and said dissatisfiedly, Why are you like this? Wang Shuman suddenly grabbed Yu Wei's collar, looked at her with hatred, and said with gritted teeth, "You don't have the ability to catch a man, but you want to destroy my Xieya. How can you be so hateful?" Bang! A loud slap hit Yu Wei's face. There was a buzzing in Yu Wei's ears. Han Chunyang was shocked. "You woman are crazy." Wang Shuman really seemed to be crazy. One slap was not enough to vent her anger. She used both hands to pinch Yu Wei's neck fiercely. "You hurt my daughter like this, why don't you just die? Just die." Yu Wei's face flushed instantly, and she grabbed Wang Shuman's wrist hard. Han Chunyang also rushed over and finally pulled Wang Shuman's hand away after a long time. She was afraid and blocked Yu Wei behind her. Looking at Yu Wei's swollen face, she was very angry. "Xiao has been beaten half to death by Yang Wenju. What else do you want?" Wang Shuman gritted his teeth and said, "He should be beaten to death." Han Chunyang was so angry that she put her hands on her hips when she heard this. "If you hadn't taught your daughter well, she would have hooked up with a married man. How could my son kidnap her?" Wang Shuman looked at her in disbelief. "Mom." Yu Wei pulled her. Han Chunyang shook her hand off, and Yu Haixing said sullenly, "Stop talking. If we don't tell them, the Yang family will think that our Yu family is scared." Han Chunyang straightened her back. "Even if my son was wrong in kidnapping your daughter, it's half the fault of both of them. Xiao got beaten, and we apologized. What else do you want?" Wang Shuman laughed in anger. "You are so shameless. I will definitely call the police to arrest your son. I will make him spend the rest of his life in jail." Han Chunyang was calm and collected. "The Yang and Yu families are relatives. Do you want to call the police to arrest Yang Wenju's brother-in-law? Does Yang Wenju agree?" "Mom, please stop talking." Yu Wei felt a deep sense of powerlessness in her heart. Yu Haixing sighed. Wang Shuman gritted her teeth. If Yang Wenju had refused to give in, she wouldn't have waited until now to call the police. But the Yu family is really going too far. Was there anything wrong with what I said? Han Chunyang was angry when she thought of Yang Wenju beating Yu Mo half to death. If he dares to send Xiao Mo to the police station, then he can forget about being the son-in-law of the Yu family. Whether he goes to jail or not has nothing to do with me. Yang Wenju's cold voice sounded. Yu Wei raised her head and saw Yang Wenju coming down from the second floor. He was still wearing the same clothes he wore last night. He must have stayed by Wenxia's side all night. "Wenju, what do you mean?" Yang Wenju's eyes swept across Yu Wei's swollen face. He told her not to come, but she came anyway. She was hopelessly stupid. He did it himself. He is an adult and should pay the price for his actions. "You really want Xiao Mo to go to jail?" Han Chunyang looked at him in disbelief. "Why? If you hadn't been in contact with Wenxia, how could Xiao Mo do such a thing? If you come to the Yang family just to confuse right and wrong, the Yang family does not welcome you." Yang Wenju's face was cold. "Come on, send the guests away." The bodyguard outside the house walked in. Han Chunyang looked at him in shock. "Are you going to kick us out?" Yang Wenju looked calm. "Xia needs to rest now." "Yang Wenju, do you still know who your wife is?" Yu Wei looked at the bodyguards surrounding her, not wanting to embarrass herself further. "Mom, let's go." Yu Haixing also grabbed her and said with a sullen face, "You think it's not embarrassing enough? Shameful? If I were asked to leave by Yang Wenju's bodyguards today, that would be shameful." Bang! A loud noise suddenly came from upstairs. Chapter 12 I Will Help You. Yu Wei looked up and saw Yang Wenju running upstairs like the wind. "What are you still standing there for? Show him out," Wang Shuman said, and went upstairs in a hurry. Yu Wei stopped and said, "Mom and Dad, you go back to the hospital first." Han Chunyang wanted to say something, but Yu Haixing waved his hand and left angrily. Han Chunyang hurriedly followed him out. Yu Wei turned around and went upstairs. The door of Wenxia's room was open, and her crying could be faintly heard. "Yang Wenju, I'm scared, don't leave." When Yu Wei walked to the door, she saw Wenxia sitting on the ground with the desk lamp she had overturned beside her. Yang Wenju was kneeling on the ground with one leg bent, dragging and hugging her, while she put her arms behind his back, hugging him tightly. The space between the two of them was so tight that there was no room for a third person. "The ground is cold, let me help you to the bed first." Yang Wenju's voice was unusually gentle. "Why can't I wash off the smell on my body?" Wenxia said, and suddenly her emotions lost control and she began to tear her clothes frantically. When Yu Wei saw the large and small purple scars on her body, her heart was shocked. Sia, don't do this. Yang Wenju carried her to the bed and wrapped her in a quilt to prevent her from hurting herself. When Sia looked at Wang Shuman again and said in a trembling voice, "Mom, help me turn on the water, I want to take a bath." "Xia, you have already washed 3 times today." Wang Shuman looked at her with heartache. Not enough, not enough. I want to take a shower." Okay, Mom will run you a bath right away." Wang Shuman hurriedly comforted her. Yang Wenju held her shoulders and said, "Sai Ya, you are fine now. Everything is over." When Sia looked at him, and caught a glimpse of the figure at the door from the corner of her eyes, tears rolled down her cheeks, and her voice broke. "I want Yumo to pay the price. I want to send him to jail. Wenju, you will help me, right?" Looking at Wen Sia's fragile appearance, Yang Wenju said in a low voice, "Yes, I will help you." Yu Wei's heart tightened. Wen Sia was the white moonlight in his heart. Now that she had suffered such a thing, how could she think that Yang Wenju would show mercy to Yumo because of the love between them? Yu Wei hurried back to their hospital. Yao Lin had already left, and only Han Chunyang was guarding the bedside. Han Chunyang fed Yumo porridge while wiping the corners of his lips. Yu Wei looked at Yumo with indifference. Why does Wen Sia have so many wounds on her body? Yumo's face was swollen like a pig's head. He had difficulty opening his mouth, but he still tried his best to say, she framed me. Did Wen Sia inflict those injuries on herself? Who would believe it if I told them? Did you hear that? My son didn't do anything to that Wen Sia. Yu Wei looked at her helplessly. Mom, even if Xiao Mo didn't do anything to Wen Sia, it is a fact that he kidnapped her. As long as Wen Sia calls the police, he will have to go to jail. He will be sentenced to at least 5 years in prison. Han Chunyang panicked when she heard this. 5 years. He was just trying to scare her. Why should he be sentenced to 5 years? Wei, go and beg Wenju to ask the Yang family not to call the police. The back of Yu Wei's hand was still aching slightly, and her cheek was also burning with pain. Thinking of how worried he was about Wen Sia, her heart choked. What else could she get from begging him except cold words? After what happened this morning, it would be even more difficult to get the Yang family's forgiveness. Yu Wei stayed in the hospital for 3 days. Yu Mo's condition improved, but the Yang family did not take any action. Old Madam Yang returned to the old house and called Yu Wei over for dinner. Before she left, Han Chunyang specifically told her to talk to old Madam Yang about the matter. As long as old Madam Yang disagreed, the Yang family would definitely not dare to call the police. Yu Wei rushed to the old house and Yang Wenju was waiting for her at the door. Grandma doesn't know about Sia's affairs. Yang Wenju said coldly, I don't intend to let her know either. If you still feel guilty about her, keep your mouth shut. Yu Wei looked at him. His handsome face showed a hint of fatigue. She had never seen Yang Wenju like this before. In fact, she had not planned to tell her grandmother. Although her grandmother loved her, Wen Sia was the victim in this matter. It was reasonable for her grandmother to favor Wen Sia, and she did not want to embarrass her grandmother. Of course I feel guilty towards her. Yu Wei looked at him calmly. Then what do you feel towards her? Guilt? Sympathy or? Mrs. Yang, are you still in the mood to be jealous now? Yang Wenju interrupted her. Yu Wei's expression was calm. I just hope you can put yourself in the right place. Oh? Where should I be? Wen Sia is in the Yang family, and you are not the only cousin. Yu Wei said calmly, if you don't want grandma to know, you should put yourself in the position of a cousin. Yang Wenju smiled sarcastically, since you care about me so much, stay in the old house these few days and act with me. After saying this, Yang Wenju turned around and walked inside. Yu Wei frowned and followed in slowly. When old Madam Yang saw Yu Wei, she smiled, held her hand and talked to her for a long time. Yang Wenju stayed for a while and then found an excuse to go upstairs. Before dinner, old Madam Yang asked Yu Wei to go upstairs and call Yang Wenju. Wenju said that he has to deal with some things at the branch office recently, so he has to live in the old house. Is that true? Yu Wei thought of Yang Wenju's words and nodded. You can come and live with us. Old Madam Yang looked at her with a smile. It's just right for you to stay with grandma for a few days. Yu Wei thought of Yang Wenju's words and did not refuse. After reaching the second floor, Yu Wei walked straight to Wenxia's door. Just as she was about to knock, the door, which was already ajar, was blown open a little more by the wind. Through the crack in the door, she saw Wenxia leaning against the head of the bed with a pale face, and Yang Wenju sitting on a chair beside the bed. He was wearing a white shirt with his sleeves rolled up, holding a porcelain bowl in his hand, and feeding her something. Wenxia drank from his hand, bit by bit, looking at him with gentle and affectionate eyes. He had his back to her, so she couldn't see his expression, but she could imagine how gentle his eyes could be. Her eyes felt a little sore and Yu Wei wanted to turn around and leave. Third sister-in-law. Wenxia's pale voice sounded. Yu Wei had to look over. Wenxia looked calm. Since you're at the door, why don't you come in? Yu Wei opened the door and looked at Yang Wenju. Grandma asked me to call you downstairs for dinner. You guys eat first, no need to wait for me. Wenxia looked at him apologetically. You didn't eat well at noon because you were taking care of me. If you don't eat well at night, I will be sad. Yu Wei clenched her palms. Wenxia looked at Yu Wei again. Third sister-in-law, you don't mind taking care of me for a while, right? Yang Wenju frowned. How can she take care of others? I just want my third sister-in-law to accompany me. Wenxia looked at him with a smile. Is it not possible? Yang Wenju was silent for a moment, then glanced at Yu Wei again. The doctor said she needs to rest. At this point, what could she do to Wenxia? What dared she do to Wenxia? He overestimated her. No, he just cared too much about Wenxia. Yu Wei's voice was sour. Okay. Chapter 13. Don't go where you shouldn't go. Yang Wenju left the room. Wenxia concealed the gentleness on her face, changing from the weak and helpless look she had just had. Wenju has been here taking care of me these days. You shouldn't mind, right? After all, it's your Yu family that made me like this. Come to think of it, I should really thank your brother. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't have known that Wenju still cared about me so much. Yu Wei suppressed the gloom in her heart and said, I'm sorry that Yu Mo did this. We, the Yu family, will do our best to make it up to you for the harm he caused you. Wenxia sneered, make it up to me. Okay, then kneel down now and kowtow to me 3 times. Yu Wei looked at her in surprise. What? You said it so nicely, but you refused to kneel down when I asked you to. Wenxia's eyes were mocking, and a cruel light flashed in her watery eyes. Didn't you enjoy it when my mother knelt down to you? I didn't ask her to kneel down to me, it was just a coincidence. Coincidence? Wenxia clenched her palms. Yu Wei, who do you think you are? Do you think you are worthy of my mother's disdain? I really didn't ask her to kneel down to me. Wenxia sneered and said slowly, you should know that Wenju has promised to call the police for me. The reason why he didn't call the police these days is that he was waiting for my wounds to heal for the sake of my reputation. He has always been like this, always thinking of me. So that's how it is. Yu Wei felt a sense of bitterness spreading in her heart. Wenxia looked at her proudly. If you don't kneel down to me today, I will ask Wenju to call the police for me tomorrow. Do you believe it? Yu Wei's eyes darkened a little. After all, she and Yang Wenju were husband and wife, and he had no intention of divorcing her. She didn't believe that he could really do something so ruthless. Knock, knock, knock. Someone knocks on the door. Third young madam, the old lady is calling you to come downstairs for dinner. Yu Wei responded. When the footsteps faded away, Yu Wei spoke. Even if I kneel down for you, you won't let Yu Mo go. If you don't kneel, how do you know I won't? Yu Wei asked her back. Were the wounds on your body really caused by Yu Mo? Wenxia looked at her and smiled indifferently. Does it matter who did it? Yu Wei understood. You are so cruel to yourself. Your purpose should not just be to make me kowtow to you. What do you want? What do you want? Wenxia said with a firm look, I want you to divorce Yang Wenju. As long as you divorce him, I will let Yu Mo go. Are you willing to do that? Yu Wei thought of Yang Wenju's words, of course. I can't bear to let go. After dinner, Madame Yang glanced at Wen Shuman and said, what kind of cold is so severe? I can't leave the house for several days. What does Dr. Liu say? Wang Shuman said hurriedly, it just keeps coming back. Look, it caught fire again today. Madame Yang said worriedly, if it doesn't work, let's go to the hospital. Wang Shuman forced a smile and said, I'm almost well. Thank you for your concern, Mom. Madame Yang retracted her gaze and said, Wei Wei, Wenju, accompany Grandma to walk in the backyard. Grandma, it's cold, and you're worried about catching a cold. Take 100 steps after dinner, and live to be 99. Old Madam Yang glanced at Yang Wenju and snorted, don't you want Grandma to live to be 99? I naturally hope that Grandma lives a long life. Yang Wenju smiled and held the old lady's arm, and he and Yu Wei accompanied her for a walk in the backyard. 3 people walked along the cobblestone path. After walking a few steps, old Madam Yang sat on a bench nearby and said, Grandma is too old to walk anymore. You two can walk for her. If you can't walk anymore, go back. Madam Yang glared at him again and said, I'll wait for you here. The two had no choice but to keep walking along the path. Wenju, it's dark and the road is slippery, you hold Wei Wei's hand. Yang Wenju pulled Yu Wei's hand and held it in his palm. Yu Wei thought of his attentiveness in front of Wenxia's bed and tried to break free, but failed. After they walked a little further away and made sure the old lady couldn't see them, Yang Wenju grabbed her hand tightly and pulled her in front of him, looking unhappy. Why are you hiding? Yu Wei turned her head away. I just think you don't really want to hold my hand. It's obviously you who didn't want to hold the hand, but you pushed it onto me. Yang Wenju mocked, when will you stop pretending like this? Yu Wei raised her head and looked at him calmly. I don't want to hold your hand, can you let go? Yang Wenju gritted his teeth and let go of his hand. Who cares? He turned around and walked forward with big strides. He had long legs and he took big steps on purpose, hoping to leave her behind. Yu Wei was too lazy to bother him, so she walked alone behind him. She was wearing a pair of small leather boots with heels. Yang Wenju walked in places where there were no street lights. Yu Wei wanted to go back, but was afraid of running into the old lady. After walking a few steps, my foot suddenly slipped, oops. There was a piercing pain in my ankle. Yu Wei took off her shoes and rubbed her ankle. Fortunately, no bones were broken. Did you do this on purpose? The man's dissatisfied voice sounded. Yu Wei looked at him in confusion. Grandma asked me to hold your hand, but you refused and then you sprained your ankle. You really wanted me to get criticized. Yu Wei felt a little aggrieved. If you hadn't insisted on taking this road, how could I have sprained my ankle? Yang Wenju's face darkened, and he directly picked the person up horizontally. Yu Wei cried out softly and turned her head away. You don't have to hold me. If you don't let me hold you, who do you want to hold you? Yang Wenju snorted coldly. It's a pity that some people are beyond my reach. Yu Wei glared at him angrily. Yang Wenju, stop being so sarcastic. Yang Wenju pretended to throw her down, and Yu Wei hurriedly hugged his neck. Yang Wenju sneered, it's better to be sarcastic than to say one thing and mean another. Yu Wei simply shut up and stopped communicating with him. When old lady Yang saw Yang Wenju bringing the person back, she asked worriedly, what happened to Wei Wei? Yang Wenju said helplessly, she insisted on playing a joke on me and fell down. Old Madam Yang was so angry that she slapped him and said, I asked you to hold her hand, why are you making trouble with her? Grandma, I'm fine. I will never make trouble with her again, okay? Yang Wenju carried the person upstairs. Madam Yang said calmly, Wei Wei is injured, you should stay in the house and take good care of her. Don't go to places you shouldn't go. Yang Wenju paused, I understand, Grandma. Yang Wenju carried her back to the room, put her on the bed, lifted her ankle, pressed it a few times. Does it still hurt? Yu Wei shook her head. No bones were hurt. It doesn't hurt that much anymore. The two were very close, and Yu Wei was a little dazed. He would also care about her, right? Yang Wenju, will you really help when Xia called the police? Yang Wenju paused, stood up, and looked down at her. Mrs. Yang, how are you going to please me this time? Yu Wei didn't think that Yang Wenju was in the mood to do anything with her right now. He said this just to mock her. I know that what Yu Mo did was totally wrong, but he is my brother, and he did it for me. I can't just watch him go to jail. Yu Wei looked up at him. We are husband and wife. Apart from begging you, I don't know who else I can ask for help. Chapter 14. Don't take everything on your own. The light shone on her palm-sized face. In just a few days, she had lost a lot of weight. Why do you think Yu Mo dared to do this? He is just relying on the fact that you are my wife and he has nothing to fear. Yang Wenju snorted coldly. If you don't dampen his arrogance, do you think he will restrain himself in the future? Yu Wei naturally knew Yu Mo's temper, and couldn't help but say, except for putting him in jail. You can punish him any way you want. Punish him? It was just a beating, but she was going to punish him. How else could she punish him? Yang Wenju didn't respond. He took his clothes and went to the bathroom. After taking a shower, he turned on his computer and started processing documents. At around 10 o'clock, a servant came over and said that the old lady had made soup for the two of them. Yu Wei put the soup on Yang Wenshu's desk. Would you like a bowl? Yang Wenshu's gaze fell on the back of her hand. Yu Wei had originally fair skin, and although the burn on the back of her hand had healed, it still looked a little red. His wife is really tolerant. After drinking the soup, Yang Wenju turned off the computer and went to bed. Yu Wei turned off the lights, threw back the quilt, and lay down on the bed with her back to him. The room was very quiet, with the sound of insects chirping outside. Yu Wei couldn't sleep. Her grandmother asked the two of them to take a walk and sent someone to deliver soup, probably because she was afraid that he would go to see Wenxia. She couldn't help but wonder when he would give up. Would it be after she fell asleep? Just as she was daydreaming, Yang Wenju suddenly turned over and hugged her in his arms. Feeling the heat behind her, Yu Wei's body stiffened a little. Warm breath blew behind her ear, and his palm moved down little by little. Yu Wei didn't understand his intention. His broad palm slowly held her hand and rubbed it gently. His light breathing was heard in her ears. Yu Wei didn't know for a moment whether he was awake or asleep. The next morning, when Yu Wei woke up, Yang Wenju was no longer in the room. The phone rang urgently. As soon as Yu Wei answered the phone, she heard Han Chunyang crying, "Wei Wei, there are a lot of people in uniform in the hospital. They want to take Xiao Mo away. Come quickly." Yu Wei sat up and asked, "What did you say?" "The Yang family called the police. Now they want to detain Xiao Mo. Wei Wei, what should we do?" Han Chunyang started crying as she spoke. "Mom, don't cry yet, I'll be at the hospital soon." Yu Wei got up, washed up simply, and left the room in a hurry. As soon as she went out, she happened to meet Yang Wenju coming out of Wenxia's room. Yu Wei felt a pang of bitterness in her heart. How could she have thought that she could surpass Wenxia in his heart? She was so ridiculous. Yu Wei stopped looking at him and went downstairs. When Yang Wenju looked over, he only had time to see her back. When Yu Wei rushed to the hospital, she saw several police officers guarding outside Yu Mo's ward. When Han Chunyang saw her, she immediately came over crying, "The people inside are questioning, and some are going to find a doctor to find out what happened. Wei Wei, what should we do? Are they going to take Xiaomor away?" "Mom, don't worry." Yu Wei held her hand. "Wei Wei, didn't you tell the old lady? How could the Yang family do this?" Han Chunyang cried and cursed, "Yang Wenju is really a piece of shit. He doesn't treat you as his wife at all, and he doesn't treat our Yu family as relatives. If I had known, I shouldn't have let you marry him." "Mom." Yu Wei held her hand tightly. "Wei Wei." A figure hurried over. Yu Wei hurried over and said, "Brother Sharon, I'm so sorry to have to trouble you to come all this way. Don't be polite with me." Qin Xian patted her shoulder, "Don't worry, I'll go and find out the situation first." Yu Mo's physical condition did not allow him to be discharged from the hospital, so Qin Xian helped him get bail pending trial. "Wei Wei, your brother is in criminal detention, which proves that the police have certain evidence in their hands." Qin Xian's face was solemn. "We are still in the investigation stage. We still have room to maneuver, but the other party is the Yang family." Yu Wei naturally understood what he meant. How many people in the entire imperial capital dared to go against the Yang family? Even if Qin Xian is one of the top lawyers in the imperial capital, he would not go against the Yang family. "Wei Wei, if you ask me, you should still communicate with the Yang family about this matter. First, see what evidence they have provided to the police and see if they have left you any room for maneuver." "I understand. Thank you, Brother Xian. Why are you being so polite to me? I'll go back to the law firm first. We'll contact each other anytime if there's anything else." After seeing Qin Xian off, Yu Wei's face turned pale. Han Chuanyan's eyes were red from crying, "Wei Wei, Xiaomor can't go to jail, you have to think of a solution." Yang Wenju could call the police regardless of their relationship as husband and wife, so what else could she do? Kneel down to Wenxia and then divorce Yang Wenju. Yu Wei had no intention of going back to the old house to act with Yang Wenju. She stayed in the hospital to accompany Yu Mo and let Han Chunyang go home to rest. During this period, Mrs. Yang called her, but she made the excuse that something happened at home and she did not return to the old house. Wei Wei, tell grandma, is it Wenju who made you unhappy? Yu Wei clutched her phone tightly. No, grandma, something happened at home. What's going on at home? Can Wenju help? You are husband and wife, you shouldn't do everything by yourself. Tears slid down her cheeks. She had begged him so humbly, but he still refused to let Yu Mo go. What else could she do? I know, grandma. After hanging up the phone, Yu Wei leaned back in her chair, feeling more tired than ever before. In the evening, she fed Yu Mo porridge. The swelling on Yu Mo's face had gone down, but because Yang Wenju had knocked out several of his teeth, he still had difficulty speaking. Don't beg them. At worst, I'll go to jail. Yu Wei glared at him. You think prison food is delicious, right? Your parents raised you up just to send you to prison, right? When will you grow up? When will you understand things? Looking at her red eyes, Yu Mo looked away. It's because you are too cowardly. Yu Wei stuffed him with another large spoonful of porridge, wishing she could fill his mouth with it. Knock, knock, knock. Someone knocks on the door. Yu Wei responded, and a man in a suit came in. Young madam, Mr. Yang is outside the hospital and wants to see you. Yu Wei recognized this as Gao Li, Yang Tingsong's assistant. Yu Wei said a few words to the nurse, then stood up and walked out with Gao Li. A black Bentley stopped on the side of the road near the hospital. Gao Li went over and helped her open the back door. Yu Wei got into the car and called out respectfully, Dad. Yang Tingsong nodded and got straight to the point. I heard that your Yu family has encountered some difficulties recently. After being married to Yang Wenju for 3 years, Yu Wei had met Yang Tingsong only a handful of times. Yang Wenju was not close to this father, and she didn't quite understand why Yang Tingsong suddenly became concerned about the Yu family. Before Yu Wei could answer, Yang Tingsong spoke up, I can help you, but I have one condition. Although Yang Tingsong is nearly 60 years old, he has been well maintained. He wears a smart suit and looks elegant, with the charm of a mature man. His words are full of the dignity of a superior. What conditions? Chapter 15. Kneeling is still worth considering. Help someone heal. Yu Wei looked at him in surprise, and after a moment of silence, she said, I'm sorry, I'm no longer practicing medicine. Yang Tingsong looked out the window and said, Mr. Yu has taught you everything he has learned in his life. You just need to do a little bit of work. Just a piece of cake. According to Yang Tingsong's status and position, he must be able to provide the world's top medical conditions. He came to her. The other party's situation must be very grim. Yu Wei said calmly, I am powerless. Yang Tingsong handed her a medical record and said, I'll give you 3 days to think about it. Yu Wei hesitated for a moment, took the medical record, pushed the door and got out of the car. Yu Wei stayed in the hospital all night. When Han Chunyang arrived at the hospital, her eyes were swollen. Wei Wei, I haven't dared to tell your father about this. Why don't you go and ask Wenju for help? The Yang family called the police. His attitude was already very clear. If she continued to beg him, she would only bring shame upon herself. But she couldn't just watch Yu Mo go in. Yu Wei hurried back to the old house. Yang Wenju had not left the house yet. When he saw Yu Wei come in, he handed the tie to her. Yu Wei hesitated for a moment, walked over to take the tie, and tiptoed to put the tie under her collar. The sunlight came in through the window and fell on her pale little face. Yang Wenju took the opportunity to pinch her waist and look down at her. He went to see you. He already knew this morning that Yang Tingsong had looked for her last night. Yu Wei said him. Yang Wenju increased the strength of his hands. What did he say? Yu Wei frowned in pain, but her hands didn't stop moving. He said he could help Yu Mo, but he wanted me to treat someone else. Yang Wenju's face darkened. You agreed? Yu Wei shook her head. No. No best. Yang Wenju said coldly, don't cause trouble for yourself. Although Yu Wei didn't have much contact with Yang Tingsong, there was a lot of gossip about him in the circle. His marriage with Yang Wenju's mother had long been in name only, and he had another woman outside who was seriously ill. Yu Wei whispered, he gave me 3 days to think about it. Yang Wenju grabbed her waist tightly, are you threatening me? Yu Wei looked up at him, you can also think of this as me begging you to spare Yumo this time. You are not qualified to negotiate with me. Yang Wenju said coldly, his eyes sweeping across the cyan color under her eyes. The person he hurt was Sai Ya, and it is Sai Ya who has the final say on whether to let him go or not. Knock knock knock. There was a rapid knock on the door. Wenju, go check on Xiaya. Yang Wenju let go of her and walked out the door quickly without even tying his tie. Yu Wei laughed at herself. She was indeed not qualified. How could she be compared with the white moonlight in his heart? Yang Wenju rushed to Wenxia's room. Wenxia had already changed her clothes. She looked at him with a smile and said, "My mom is just making a fuss. I'm fine now. I just want to go out for a walk. Can you accompany me?" Wang Shuman said worriedly, "Your fever has just subsided. What if?" "Mom, I'm really fine now." Yang Wenshu's face darkened. "I'll arrange for a bodyguard to accompany you." The smile on Wenxia's face froze. "Are you blaming me for calling the police?" Wang Shuman hurriedly said, "Wenju, I called the police. If you want to blame someone, blame me. Calling the police is your right." Yang Wenju whispered, "I don't blame you. The company's affairs have been delayed for too long. I need to go back and deal with them. Then can you give me a ride?" Yang Wenju didn't refuse again, and the two of them went out together. When they got in the car, Li Wan handed some documents to Yang Wenju, who began to deal with them. Wenxia wanted to talk to him, but seeing that he was busy, she had to lean against the window. The cell phone rang, and Yang Wenju answered the call. "Boss Yang, there was a call from young Master Meng about the Yu family case. He's very concerned." Yang Wenshu's face darkened. Since when did the affairs of the Yang and Yu families need an outsider to care about them? Yang Wenju hung up the phone and threw it aside. Wenxia was a little surprised. Yang Wenju never showed his emotions. Who could make him so angry? Wenxia looked at him pitifully. "Did I make things difficult for you?" The night Yu Wei returned to the old house, she sat on the bed and waited for him all night. It was also that night that made her realize that for Yu Wei, he would never call the police. Yang Wenju rubbed his temple and said, "No, don't let your imagination run wild." The car stopped downstairs of the company, and Yang Wenju got out of the car. "I will send bodyguards to protect you, so relax." Watching the man's back as he left, Wenxia clenched her palms tightly. She caught a glimpse of the phone he left in the car from the corner of her eye, and her eyes moved. Yu Wei took a shower, changed her clothes, and rushed back to the hospital. Han Chunyang looked at her expectantly. "Wei, what did Wenju say?" Yu Wei shook her head at her. Han Chunyang's feet went weak and she almost fell. Yu Wei hurriedly supported her and said, "Mom, don't worry. I will think of another way." "What else can we think of?" "If Yang Wenju wants Xiao Mo to go to jail, who would dare to save him?" Han Chunyang started crying again. "Is jail a place for people?" Yu Wei comforted her a few more words and let her go home. In the afternoon, Yu Wei read the medical record given to her by Yang Tingsong. It was a medical record of a woman. If it were an ordinary person, according to the situation in the medical record, she would probably have died long ago. In the evening, just after Yu Wei fed Yu Mo, she received a call from Yao Lin. Wei, I'm in the golden years now. I think I saw your mother just now." Yu Wei didn't dare to delay any longer. She said goodbye to the nurse and drove to Golden Years. Yao Lin was waiting for her at the door, and the two walked in together. "I see that your mother doesn't have a murderous look on her face, but what can a 50-year-old lady like her do here?" "What else can he do? He must be here to look for Yang Wenju." She just called Yang Wenju on the way here, but he didn't answer. Yao Lin pointed to a private room and said, "I think your mother has entered this private room. Is that Yang Wenshu's bodyguard at the door?" Yu Wei's eyes darkened and she walked over. The bodyguard saw Yu Wei and did not stop her. Yu Wei held the door handle, and when Sia's mocking voice came from inside, "Okay, as long as you kneel down and kowtow to me 3 times, I can consider letting your son go." Yu Wei's blood boiled and she pushed open the door. "Mom." There were many people in the box, but it was very quiet. Everyone looked at Han Chunyang at the door as if she were a clown. Han Chunyang changed her usual arrogance and was about to kneel down. Yu Wei rushed over and held her. "What are you doing?" Han Chunyang grabbed her hand. Wei, she said that as long as I kneel down to her, she will let Xiamor go." "Mom, she won't." When Sia shook the wine glass in her hand and said calmly, "If she doesn't kneel, I definitely won't do it. If she does, I can still consider it. I'm kneeling. Han Chunyang said, pushing Yu Wei's hand away with force, and kneeling on the ground with a thud. Mom. Yu Wei rushed over and hugged her. Even if you kneel down, she won't let Xiaomo go. Don't be stupid again. Han Chunyang was about to kowtow to the ground. Miss Wen, this is all my Xiaomo's fault. I kowtow to you on his behalf and admit my fault. I beg you to be magnanimous and let him go. Did you kowtow? When Xia looked at her with a smile, why don't I seem to hear it? Chapter 16. Don't forget you are my wife. Upon hearing this, Han Chunyang struggled and kowtowed to the ground. Yu Wei couldn't stop her. There was a loud bang, and the sound made Yu Wei's heart ache. Wen Xia. Yu Wei looked at Wen Xia angrily. Yao Lin was also furious. Wen Xia, does Yang Wenju know that you treat his mother-in-law like this? Wen Xia took out a cell phone and waved it at Yu Wei. You should recognize this phone, right? Wenju originally came with me to relax, but someone insisted on bothering him. He was too lazy to deal with it and threw the phone to me, so I asked Madam Yu to come here. Yu Wei naturally knew that the two of them went out together, and she also recognized that it was Yang Wenchu's personal cell phone. Thinking of what he said, Yu Wei felt a lump in her throat. Whether or not to forgive Yu Mo was up to Wen Xia, so he tacitly approved of all this. Yang Wenju is such a bastard. Yao Lin cursed angrily. Han Chunyang looked at Wen Xia. Miss Wen, I really know I was wrong. Please, let my Xiaomo go. As she said that, she was about to kowtow to the ground again. Mom, stop knocking your head. Can you please get up? Yu Wei supported Han Chunyang with all her strength. Han Chunyang was not willing to stand up. She only knew that if Yu Mo did not kowtow these 3 times, he would be arrested and sentenced. Yu Wei couldn't pull her away, so she could only hold her tightly. Han Chunyang begged, Wei Wei, please let me go. Let me knock. Seeing her mother's desperate eyes and thinking of Yang Wenchu's ruthlessness, Yu Wei closed her eyes. She looked at Wen Xia. I'm the one you hate. As for the other 2, I'll kowtow for her and you let her get up. Wei Wei, you're crazy. Yao Lin yelled angrily. She pulled one of them over and said, aren't you Yang Wenchu's good friends? Call him and ask him to come over. No one paid any attention to her. Wen Xia looked at her proudly. Okay, you come and knock on it. Han Chunyang grabbed Yu Wei and said, Wei Wei, Mom is old and can give up her reputation, but you can't. Face. When had she ever had face in front of Yang Wenchu's friends? Everyone around them held their breath at the same time. Yang Wenchu's wife was going to kneel down. I really wanted to post it on WeChat Moments to record this historic lesson. Han Chunyang shook her head. Wei Wei, you can't knock. Let mommy do it. Yu Wei smiled at her. Mom, Yu Mo committed the crime because of me, so I'll knock on this end. You get up, okay. Yu Wei helped her up and looked at Wen Xia. Wen Xia shook her wine glass and looked at her with a smile. Yu Wei took a deep breath. Just as she bent her knees, the door of the box was opened. Yang Wenju, wearing a suit, brought a gust of wind in. He grabbed Yu Wei's arm and asked coldly, what are you going to do? The smile on Wen Xia's face froze. Yu Wei looked at him coldly, kneel down before Wen Xia and beg her to let Yu Mo go. Yu Wei still has to kneel. Yang Wenju squeezed her arm. Yang Wenju, when you called the police, wasn't this what you wanted? Yu Wei looked at him with hatred. Didn't you ask me to beg her? Is kowtow twice enough? Or should I keep kowtow here until everyone is satisfied? Yu Wei tried to shake off his hand, but couldn't. Yang Wenju dragged her out of the box. Wenju. Wen Xia stood up, changing her arrogant look from before, and looked so fragile that she seemed like she could be blown down by a gust of wind. My head suddenly hurts. Can you take me to the hospital? Yang Wenju paused. Yu Wei sneered and waited for him to let go. Li Wan, send Miss Six to the hospital. Yang Wenju dragged Yu Wei out after saying a few words without even looking at Wen Xia. Wen Xia gritted her teeth in anger. Yao Lin supported Han Chunyang and said, Auntie, I'll take you home. Han Chunyang thought of Yang Wenchu's gloomy face when he took Yu Wei away, and said worriedly, is Wei Wei okay? Yao Lin glanced at Wen Xia and said sarcastically, what can happen to Wei Wei? They are a couple, they fight at the head of the bed and make up at the foot of the bed. It's just that the young couple has a quarrel, and some clown is making a fuss about it. Wenxia's face was distorted with anger. Li Wan walked up to Wenxia and said, "Sixth miss, can you walk by yourself?" Wenxia clenched her palms and walked out quickly. Li Wan said, "Sixth miss, Mr. Yang's cell phone." Wenxia paused, threw the phone to Li Wan, and then walked out of the box. Li Wan put away his phone and looked at the crowd around him. "Everyone, Mr. Yang has said that what happened tonight is the Yang family's family affair. If any pictures or news leak out, it will be bad for everyone." Everyone was a little surprised when they heard this. Didn't Yang Wenju not take his wife seriously at all? Yang Wenju grabbed Yu Wei's wrist and walked out of the club at a brisk pace. Yu Wei was almost dragged forward by him. She struggled all the way but couldn't get away at all. "Yang Wenju, where are you taking me? Let me go." Seeing that he still didn't let go, Yu Wei became angry and bit the back of his hand hard. Yang Wenju paused and finally let go of her hand. The next second, Yu Wei felt dizzy and was carried on his shoulders. "Yang Wenju, let me go." Yu Wei hit his back hard. Yang Wenju remained unmoved. The driver had been waiting outside the club for a long time. When he saw the two people coming out, he hurriedly opened the car door. Yang Wenju had a gloomy face and stuffed Yu Wei into the car. Yu Wei tried to open the other door, but Yang Wenju pulled her back and pressed her against the back of the chair. "Have you had enough of making trouble?" "Is she making trouble?" Yu Wei looked at him with red eyes. "No. Are you an idiot? She told you to kneel, so you kneeled." Yang Wenju looked at her coldly, anger hidden in his dark eyes. "Do you know whose face you are embarrassing by kneeling? Shame on you." Yu Wei laughed mockingly. "Yang Wenju, when you chose to ignore the relationship between us and call the police, you should have known that our Yu family has lost face. Don't forget, you are my wife." Yu Wei asked him back, "Am I? After 3 years of marriage, have you ever truly considered me your wife? If you had, you wouldn't have watched the Yu family jump into the fire pit. If you had, you wouldn't leave me in such pain. If you had, you wouldn't have indulged Wenxia even though you knew she would make things difficult for my mother." Yang Wenju looked at her aggrieved expression and sneered, "I didn't treat you as my wife, so what have I treated you as in the past 3 years?" Yu Wei clenched her palms and laughed at herself, "A woman who satisfies your physical needs. You really think highly of yourself." Yang Wenju suddenly hugged Yu Wei to his lap. Yu Wei struggled hard, and he pulled her hair to make her look up. "Satisfied? What woman is like you, like a dead fish in bed? Yang Wenju?" Yu Wei looked at him with embarrassment. Thinking of what Wenxia said, what was there to insist on? Anyway, he hated her so much. "Since you are so dissatisfied with me, let's get divorced. Everything that happened in the past was my fault. I apologize to you. I will go to grandma and tell her that it was me who." Yang Wenju suddenly exerted force. Yu Wei's face wrinkled in pain. "Am I Yang Wenju someone you can summon and dismiss at will?" Yu Wei looked at him with a painful expression. "What do you want? Since you hate me so much. Since you care about Wenxia so much, can't I help you?" Chapter 17. Only I have the right to say it's over. "Who gave you this illusion?" Yang Wenju loosened his grip, and his slender fingers slowly moved downwards. He smiled sarcastically. "Who do I want to be with that needs your approval?" Yu Wei wanted to hide, but he grabbed her waist. Yang Wenju hooked his fingers on the buttons on her chest. "Besides, I'm not as philanthropic as Mrs. Yang, who can have a person in my heart and be in harmony with another person." Yu Wei looked at him in surprise. "Yang Wenju, what nonsense are you talking about?" "Nonsense." Yang Wenju exerted force, and all the buttons of Yu Wei's shirt fell to the ground. She wanted to put her clothes back on, but Yang Wenju grabbed her wrist and said, "You dare to say that you didn't ask Meng Hechuan for help?" When Yu Wei heard the name, her watery eyes moved and she shook her head blankly. "I don't have one." "Lie." Yu Wei felt a sharp pain on her collarbone and wanted to push him away, but he held her hands behind her back. "Since you only want to be a woman who satisfies my physical needs, then I will grant your wish." It was not until she was thrown onto the bed in the bedroom by Yang Wenju and saw the cruelty in his eyes that Yu Wei finally understood what he meant. She subconsciously crawled forward, but he grabbed her ankle and pulled her back. Yang Wenju took off his shirt, revealing his muscular chest, and moved closer. Yu Wei pushed him, but unfortunately she couldn't move him at all. She gritted her teeth and said, "Yang Wenju, I want to divorce you." Yang Wenju's dark eyes darkened, and he grabbed her chin and sneered, "If you dare to divorce me, I will let Mo spend the rest of his life in jail, and there will no longer be any U group in the capital." Yu Wei looked at him in shock. "You lunatic. Mad." Yang Wenju looked at her mockingly. "I'm warning you for the last time. I'm the only one who has the right to end this marriage." Yu Wei felt a surge of despair in her heart. "You obviously hate me so much." "Who said I hate you?" His slender fingers teased her wantonly. "Mrs. Yang has such a good figure. Although it's a little stiff, I can't bear to hate you." Yu Wei's body shamefully reacted to his teasing. She felt ashamed and annoyed. He clearly knew how to arouse her, but he insisted on saying that she was like a dead fish. Looking at her flushed face, Yang Wenju stopped and smiled sarcastically. "Do you know what it means to satisfy me?" Yu Wei had a bewildered look on her face. The next second, her body, which was not yet prepared, felt a piercing pain because of his actions. The pain reminded her of that rainy night. She originally thought it was an absurd erotic dream until he aggressively broke into her body. The pain made her start to resist. He grasped her wrist and looked at her, his dark eyes filled with lust and disgust. "The look in my memory overlaps with the one in front of me." Yu Wei bit his shoulder in pain. Yang Wenju stopped what he was doing and let her bite him. "Are you still going to talk about divorce?" Yu Wei turned her face away and gritted her teeth. "Yang Wenju, you bastard." Yang Wenju lowered his head and kissed away the tears from her eyes. "Are you a bastard? You're still far from satisfying me." It was already past 10 o'clock the next morning when Yu Wei woke up, and her eyes were a little swollen. Yang Wenju had already changed his clothes and felt refreshed. Yu Wei turned her head away and cursed him as a bastard in her heart. "If you want to scold me, just do it. It's so uncomfortable to hold it in your heart." Yang Wenju walked to the bedside and looked down at her. "Are you still going to talk about divorce?" Hearing this, Yu Wei's body instinctively felt a little sore. Every time he tortured her last night, he would ask her this question in her ear. If she didn't say anything, he would prolong the torture indefinitely. "No words." Yang Wenju laughed. "I don't mind teaching you again." Yu Wei clenched her palms and shook her head in embarrassment. Yu Wei's tense body didn't relax until she heard the door close. Apart from the fact that he deliberately hurt her at the beginning, he later changed to other methods to humiliate her. He was simply a pervert. Yu Wei got out of bed and almost fell down as she walked. She cursed Yang Wenju in her heart all the way. She took a shower, changed her clothes, and drove out of the villa. On the way, I received a call from Qin Xian. "Wei Wei, what did the Yang family say?" Yu Wei thought of Wenxia and Yang Wenchu's attitudes and said helplessly, "Wenxia will not let Mo go. As far as I know, the evidence the police currently have is not enough to convict Mo." Yu Wei's eyes moved. Wenxia's goal was to make her divorce Yang Wenju, so she naturally left room for them. But how could she dare to ask him for a divorce now? A deep despair rose in her heart. Yu Wei drove to the outside of the clinic. She looked at the iron lock on it, and her grandfather's pale face before he died flashed through her mind. "Wei Wei, don't blame anyone. Grandpa is just too tired and wants to take a rest." Tears rolled down my cheeks. After calming down, Yu Wei called Yang Tingsong. Yang Tingsong was not surprised by her decision. "The treatment will start tomorrow. I will send a car to pick you up." In the afternoon, Yu Wei rushed to the hospital. Han Chunyang was waiting in the ward. When she saw her come in, she asked anxiously, "Wei Wei, how are you? What did Wenju say?" Yu Wei smiled and said, "Mom, the matter has been resolved. Don't worry, Mo will not go to jail." Han Chunyang breathed a sigh of relief. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes and said, "That's good. I knew Yang Wenju wouldn't be so heartless." Yu Wei didn't say anything. Office of the President of Yangshe Group. Li Wan hurried in. "Boss Yang, the police just called and said that someone from the Yang family has gone over to negotiate, and the case has been solved." "It's still too late." Yang Wenchu's face darkened. This stupid woman. Mo's problem has been resolved, and Yu Wei returned to the old house in the evening. The old house was very lively. Yu Wei walked into the living room and found that it was her mother-in-law Shen Meiling who had returned to the old house. Yu Wei stepped forward and respectfully called her Mom. Shen Meiling pretended not to hear and continued to hold the scarf around Dao Jing's neck. "I knew this pattern would suit you." Dao Jing took the scarf and smiled flatteringly. "Thank you, second sister-in-law." "You're welcome." Yu Wei wanted to go upstairs, but after taking a few steps, Shen Mailing suddenly spoke up. "People from small families come in without manners. Can't you see I'm here?" Yu Wei stopped and called out, "Mom," again. Shen Mailing glanced at her and said, "I'm thirsty. Come and pour me some tea." Yu Wei took off her coat, handed it to the servant beside her, and walked into the living room. The servant who was originally guarding beside her retreated. Yu Wei bent down, picked up the teapot, and poured tea for everyone. Shen Mailing took a sip and said, "It tastes bitter." Yu Wei had no choice but to pour out all the tea and boil new tea leaves. Her movements were methodical. Because everyone was sitting and they were elders, Yu Wei almost knelt on the carpet. "Pour the tea again," and Yu Wei handed it to Shen Mailing. "Mom, the tea is ready." Shen Mailing's eyes fell on Yu Wei's face. Yu Wei has a typical oval face, fair skin, picturesque eyebrows and eyes, and exudes a gentle temperament. "I don't want to drink pure tea anymore." Shen Mailing couldn't hide her disgust for her. "Let's make some more scented tea." Yu Wei had no choice but to be patient, pour out the brewed tea and brew it again. Everyone was chatting and laughing, and Yu Wei was quietly making tea. Because she was kneeling, Yu Wei's legs felt a little sore. Finally the tea was brewed again. Shen Mailing picked up the teacup, took a sip, and frowned. "What kind of tea did you make? Try it yourself. Is it delicious?" Before Yu Wei could react, a cup of hot tea was splashed on her face. Chapter 18. You won't help me. Although the temperature of the tea would not burn the skin, it still left red marks on Yu Wei's face. The living room instantly fell silent. Although Shen Mailing didn't like her daughter-in-law, it was the first time she embarrassed her in public. Moreover, the old lady was still in the house. The tea dripped down Yu Wei's cheek and onto the carpet. Yu Wei wiped her face, her voice devoid of emotion. "I'll go cook it again." "How can she make tea?" Yang Wenju walked into the living room and said helplessly, "Mom, if you want to drink tea, I'll make it for you." Shen Mailing snorted, "If she can't even make tea, what's the point of having a wife like her?" Yang Wenju took off his coat and walked into the living room. Seeing Yu Wei still half kneeling on the ground, he pulled her up and said, "Why are you still standing there? Go upstairs and change your clothes." Yu Wei stood up with the help of his force, but her legs were so sore. Fortunately, Yang Wenju supported her waist in time, and Yu Wei leaned in his arms to relax. Shen Mailing looked at the intimacy between the two and a look of disgust flashed across her beautiful face. Yu Wei went upstairs. Shen Mailing looked at Yang Wenju. "Why, are you feeling distressed?" Yang Wenju took the tea bag from the servant and laughed. "What's there to be sad about? It's just that she is clumsy and I'm afraid it will affect your good mood." Yu Wei paused as she listened to Yang Wenju's words. Returning to the bedroom, Yu Wei took a shower directly. As soon as she walked out of the bathroom, she was pressed against the wall. "How can someone be as stupid as you?" Yu Wei looked at the anger in the man's eyes and turned her head away. "Your mother doesn't like me. No matter how I cook, she won't be satisfied. It's rare that you know she doesn't like you." Yang Wenju pinched her cheek and stared at her. "Then why did you agree to treat that woman?" Yu Wei looked frankly. "Do I have a choice?" Yang Wenju could not help but increase the strength of his hands. "Why can't you wait a little longer? What are you waiting for? Wait for my mom to kowtow to Wenxia." Yu Wei looked at him dissatisfiedly. "Yang Wenju, after this happened, the first person I asked for help was you, but you refused to help me. Don't you allow me to save myself." "Save yourself? You are hopelessly stupid. I am stupid to think you would help the Yu family." Yu Wei sneered. "If you are here to accuse me of something because of Wenxia, I won't accompany you. With Yang Tingsong's help, Yu Mo cannot go to jail, and Wenxia must be unhappy." Yu Wei pushed him away, but he pressed her against the wall again. "You're treating your father-in-law's lover. Do you think your grandma can protect you?" Yu Wei was very calm. "Your father won't let me get into any accidents while I'm seeing the doctor." Yang Wenju resisted the urge to strangle her to death. "Then you better be a great doctor and make that woman live 100 years. Otherwise, no one can protect you." Yang Wenju slammed the door and left. Yu Wei leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. It was probably not a coincidence that Shen Mailing returned to China at this time, but she had already promised Yang Tingsong, so she could only grit her teeth and continue on this path. The next morning, Yu Wei drove to Yang Tingsong's private villa. The villa is located halfway up the mountain, does not cover a large area and is decorated in a very low-key manner. When Yu Wei entered the living room, Yang Tingsong was half squatting on the ground, feeding medicine to a woman in a wheelchair. However, the medicine was too bitter and the woman refused to open her mouth. Yang Tingsong coaxed her patiently, without any of his usual majesty. The woman was about the same age as Yang Tingsong. She was very thin, had frighteningly white skin, and wore a hat on her head. Because of long-term illness, her eye sockets are sunken and her scapula is protruding, but it is not difficult to see that she must have been very beautiful when she was young. Noticing Yu Wei coming in, the woman's cloudy eyes brightened a little, and her voice was hoarse. "Who is she?" Yang Tingsong stood up and handed the medicine bowl to the servant beside him. "She is Wenshu's wife, and she is also the new doctor I found for you." The woman's eyes fell on Yu Wei and she smiled. "What's your name?" Yang Tingsong breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the rare smile on the woman's face. Yu Wei took a step forward. "My name is Yu Wei. My name is Song Qingher." "Hello, Aunt Song." Yu Wei responded with a friendly smile. Next, Yu Wei took Song Qingher's pulse, examined her face to face, and asked about her current medication. Song Qingher's health has been in poor condition for too long and the situation is not optimistic. Yu Wei and Yang Tingsong walked into the living room. "I'm not sure I can cure Aunt Song." Yu Wei answered truthfully. "Her body has been seriously damaged due to the primary disease and long-term medication. I can only help her regulate her body first and then prescribe the right medicine. I can only guarantee a cure of 2 years at most." 2 years? Yang Tingsong was a little excited. "Mr. Yu said before that it would take at least 10 years. Yu Wei's eyes darkened. "That was 3 years ago. Besides, I am not very talented, and the medical skills I learned from my grandfather are limited. If I am right, your medical team should give you half a year." Yang Tingsong looked at her in surprise. Yu Wei said calmly, 3 years ago, you had already missed the best time for treatment. As for why they missed each other, they both knew that when Yu Wei's grandfather was in trouble, his medical skills were questioned, and Yang Tingsong looked for another famous doctor. After leaving Yang Tingsong's villa, Yu Wei went to their hospital. Yu Mo was able to get out of bed, but he still needed someone to support him. He spoke much more fluently than before, and shouted that he wanted to confront Wenxia. Yu Wei looked at him coldly. "I'm telling you, you better keep this to yourself from now on. I did it. I admit it. I didn't do it, so why does that woman blame me?" Yu Mo was very angry. "Do you have any evidence?" Yu Wei looked at him helplessly. Yu Mo gritted his teeth in anger. Yu Wei said angrily, "From now on, don't interfere in the affairs between Yan Wenju and me. Who told you that you can't even hold onto your husband's heart?" Yu Wei's eyes dimmed. She had understood a long time ago that there are many things in this world that cannot be achieved by hard work alone. Yu Wei returned to the old house and saw Shen Meiling as soon as she entered the door. Shen Meiling's voice was cold. "Where did you go?" Yu Wei's attitude was neither humble nor arrogant. "The hospital, to see my brother." "How many years have you been married to Wenju?" 3 years. "Why isn't your stomach moving yet?" Yu Wei's face turned pale. "We have no plans to have children for the time being." Shen Meiling sneered. "Have you been to the hospital for a checkup? Is it because you had a miscarriage when you first got married that your health is failing?" "I know my body very well. There is no problem." Shen Meiling's eyes darkened. "So, you are very confident in your medical skills." Yu Wei felt a chill on her back. "I've made an appointment for you to go to the hospital tomorrow for a checkup." Shen Meiling looked her over and said with disdain, "If you can't have a baby, then you, Mrs. Yang, are really useless." After Shen Meiling left, Yu Wei breathed a sigh of relief. Yu Wei wrote a treatment plan for Song Qingher. Before she knew it, it was already 11 o'clock. She looked downstairs through the window and saw that Yang Wenju had not returned yet. Yu Wei took a shower, turned off the lights, and lay down in bed. Just when she was about to doze off, a pair of hands appeared on her waist. Yu Wei turned over, and the man's lips fell on hers, with a strong smell of alcohol. Chapter 19, Only Knowing How to Treat and Save People. Yu Wei pushed him. "You are drunk." Yang Wenju tugged at her clothes randomly. "Do you know what I hate most about you?" Her clothes were torn into a mess by him, and Yu Wei clasped his hands with a red face. "Yang Wenju, why are you acting so drunk? You clearly don't have me in your heart, but you still pretend to be deeply in love with me. Yang Wenju looked at her mockingly. Aren't you tired? After 3 years of marriage, were all her efforts and dedication just fake in his eyes? His warm hands moved over her body. Yu Wei couldn't push him away. Yang Wenju, I have never pretended anything. You're not pretending. Yang Wenju said as if he had heard a joke. You know how much I hate her. Why are you still helping her? If she had considered him at all, she would not agree to Yang Ting-song. Without waiting for Yu Wei to answer, he kissed her lips again. His kiss was overbearing and carried a sense of punishment. Yu Wei could only endure it forcedly. After the kiss, Yang Wenju said coldly, go tell Yang Ting-song that you can't treat that woman. As early as when she agreed to Yang Ting-song, she had already anticipated that her life in the Yang family would not be easy in the future, but what could she do? It was he who forced her to make this choice step by step. Yu Wei said calmly, he helped you Mo, I can't regret it. Yang Wenju gritted his teeth and said, do you need his help? I'll give you one last chance. Tell him that you can't cure him. Yu Wei turned her head away and said, one should not go back on one's word. Yang Wenju resisted the urge to strangle her and taunted her, how did you plan me in the first place if you are so stupid? I didn't. Her lips were kissed again, and Yu Wei had no chance to speak again. Yang Wenju intended to punish her, and his actions were not gentle. When Yu Wei got up in the morning, her whole body ached. Shen Mining's people were already waiting outside the house. When they saw her come out, they took her directly to the hospital. After a series of inspections, it was almost noon. Shen Mining took the test results and threw them hard in Yu Wei's face. The test results say that you have never been pregnant. What's going on? Yu Wei looked at Shen Miling in surprise. Logically speaking, the tests she had done should have made it difficult to determine whether she had had a miscarriage. So, you faked your pregnancy. Shen Miling looked at her angrily. You are so good, Yu Wei, you really did whatever it takes to marry into a wealthy family. Yu Wei looked pale. She had a wild night with Yang Wenju after getting drunk and was discovered by Han Chunyang in the morning. Han Chunyang yelled at Yang Wenju to be responsible for her. She knew that she was not forced that night, and she finally suppressed Han Chunyang's desire to go to the Yang family to seek an explanation. After all, at that time, everyone in the imperial capital knew that the Yang family was choosing a wife for the heir. Afterwards, she took birth control pills, and then her period was delayed, so she went to the hospital for a checkup. However, the examination results showed that she was pregnant. Unexpectedly, the media photographed her entering and leaving the hospital. Han Chunyang found her examination report and ran to the Yang family to make a big fuss. Old Madam Yang had always had a good impression of her, and she also wanted to have a great-grandson, so she put pressure on Yang Wenju, and later Yang Wenju agreed to marry her. Who knew that on the third day after her marriage to him, her period came? She still remembered that when she went to confess to Yang Wenju, the man was sitting on a chair in the study. The sunlight poured in from the window and fell on his body. He looked cold and distant. After the wedding, Yang Wenju had been sleeping in the guest room. That day was the first time they met since the wedding. She told him nervously that she had her period and the pregnancy was just a misunderstanding. Yang Wenju shifted his gaze from the document to her face. After studying her for a while, he spoke faintly, so, how are you going to end this? She was completely confused and shook her head subconsciously, I don't know. She thought he would resent her deception, end this wrong marriage, and even take revenge on her and the Yu family. In fact, if it weren't for this child, she would not have agreed to marry Yang Wenju. But he just looked at her coldly and said, if you want to continue to be your wife, you have to swallow this matter. She went to their hospital later, but the doctor just said they had the wrong name and sent her away. A week later, Yang Wenju moved back to the master bedroom. When he pressed on her in the middle of the night, she was still a little overwhelmed. Except for that night with him, she had never been intimate with the opposite sex and was very stiff. He didn't have much patience, and just looked at her coldly, since you are not pregnant, you should always fulfill your husband and wife obligations. I didn't marry you back as a decoration. Although the pregnancy was a misunderstanding, it became a weight that forced him to move forward with marriage, and now the matter is settled. From his perspective, this marriage was planned by her, so his indifference towards her was understandable. From her perspective, if it weren't for the Yu family's aggressiveness, he could at least marry a woman he liked, who would always feel a little indebted to him. So in the past 3 years, she has been working very hard to be a good banquet wife. She never thought that this matter would be brought up again one day. Coming back to her senses from her memories, Yu Wei opened her mouth and said, "Mom, I." "What?" Shen Meiling interrupted her. "I'm going to go to the Yu family and ask them now. They have taught her for so many years, but they have raised such a shameless daughter." Yu Wei hurriedly said, "My parents don't know about this. Then I must have a good talk with them." Shen Meiling turned and was about to leave. Yu Wei followed him and said, "This is my fault alone. Please, don't go to Yu's house. You know how to beg me now." Shen Meiling turned around, her eyes filled with deep hatred. "When you agreed to Yang Tingsong to treat that bitch, why didn't you ask for my opinion?" Yu Wei was so frightened by the hatred in her eyes that she took a step back. Shen Meiling sneered, "Do you know how it feels to be married for many years and see your husband always thinking about another woman? I have been waiting for so many years, and she is finally going to die, but you insist on saving her." Yu Wei was shocked by the hatred in Shen Meiling's eyes. She thought of Yang Wenchu's gentle care for Wenxia. Although she felt sad, she never thought of hating Wenxia. Shen Meiling looked at her coldly. "If you want to continue to be Mrs. Yang, kill that woman for me." Yu Wei shook her head subconsciously. "I only know how to treat illnesses and save lives." Shen Meiling seemed to have expected her answer. She was not as emotional as before. "When you got married, you faked your pregnancy. Then why haven't you been able to get pregnant in the past 3 years?" Yu Wei didn't know how to explain. Shen Meiling smiled and asked, "Does Wenju know that you are faking your pregnancy?" Yu Wei said in a difficult voice, "Yes." Shen Meiling said slowly, "My son, I know him. You used the child to deceive the marriage. How could he let you give birth to his child?" Yu Wei's face turned even paler. "Not to mention, he still has Wenxia in his heart." Shen Meiling looked at her dimly. "Since Wenju didn't tell me about the fake pregnancy, I can pretend I don't know." Yu Wei was a little surprised. Would Shen Meiling let her go? Shen Meiling naturally wouldn't do that. She straightened her clothes and said calmly, "It's just that the old lady wants to have a great-grandson. If you can't give birth, then find someone else." Chapter 20. See who he can protect. Change of players? Yu Wei was shocked. Shen Meiling looked at her with disgust again, then turned and left. Yu Wei couldn't figure out what Shen Meiling meant. Was she going to replace her? Or was she going to find someone else to give birth to Yang Wenchu's child? In the afternoon, Yu Wei went to the villa halfway up the mountain and gave the preliminary treatment plan to Yang Tingsong. Song Qinghe enthusiastically invited her to dinner, but Yu Wei wanted to decline. Yang Tingsong said, "She hasn't had a good meal for a long time, just think of it as accompanying me." Yu Wei couldn't refuse anymore. Song Qinghe wanted to cook herself, but Yang Tingsong refused. The two argued in the kitchen for a while, and finally Song Qinghe took the lead and Yang Tingsong started cooking. The two of them busy in the kitchen look like an ordinary couple, but they are not husband and wife. In the end, the two of them cooked 3 dishes and 1 soup, all of which were home-cooked dishes. "I don't know what you like to eat, so I made some of my specialties. You can try them and see if they suit your taste." Song Qinghe looked at her expectantly. Yu Wei picked up a piece of eggplant and chewed it carefully. "It's delicious." Song Qinghe smiled and said, "If it tastes good, come here often and I'll cook for you." Yu Wei nodded politely. For some reason, Song Qinghe's eyes were too burning when she looked at her, and Yu Wei felt a little uncomfortable. Halfway through their meal, Song Qinghe felt unwell, so Yang Tingsong carried her upstairs. "Qinghe and I once had a daughter," Yang Tingsong explained, "but she was lost shortly after she was born." Qinghe blamed herself a lot. In fact, she was able to hold on until now just because she wanted to see the child again in her lifetime. "Unfortunately, I have sent many people to look for her over the years, but there is still no clue." Yu Wei was a little surprised. Yang Tingsong continued, "That child is about your age, so when Qinghe sees you, she will think of that child and can't help but want to be nice to you." Yu Wei didn't know what to say. If the child was about her age, then she would be Yang Wenchu's half-sister, also an illegitimate daughter. After dinner, Yu Wei received a call from Yao Lin, asking her to go out for a drink. Yu Wei didn't want to go back to the old house to face Shen Meiling, so she drove to the bar. Looking at the colorful signboards, Yu Wei frowned. Yao Lin ran over and put her arm around her shoulders. "There's a new resident singer in this bar. He's so handsome. I'll take you to see him." Without waiting for Yu Wei to speak, Yao Lin took her into the bar. As soon as she entered, the deafening music gave Yu Wei a headache. Seeing her frown, Yao Lin leaned close to her ear and asked, "How come you can't adapt to this place after being a decent woman for so long?" Yu Wei smiled helplessly, pushed her away, and the two of them found a booth and sat down. After ordering drinks, Yao Lin took out her camera and began to clean the lens. Suddenly, a deafening cheer broke out around her. A young man was holding a guitar and singing on the stage. "Isn't he handsome?" Yu Wei's eyes swept over the man. The man smiled brightly and handsomely, but it seemed that he lacked some charm. Yu Wei shook her wine glass, and Yang Wenchu's face flashed through her mind. After 3 years of marriage, she seemed to have never seen him laugh heartily. In front of her, he was always calm and restrained, and his black eyes showed nothing but indifference and mockery towards her. In fact, sometimes when he held her tightly in his arms, she would have the illusion that she was deeply loved by him. Thinking of Shen Meiling's words, Yu Wei raised her head and drank it all in one gulp. The spicy taste in her mouth finally suppressed the turbid air in her heart. Yang Wenju promised her that he would not cheat on her. Yao Lin took a few photos of the stage. "Wei, isn't that Wenxia?" Yu Wei followed the direction Yao Lin pointed and saw a woman wearing sexy clothes and heavy makeup, dancing with her graceful figure on the dance floor. A group of men around her were staring at her like wolves and tigers. The lyrical song on the stage ended, the laser light swept towards the audience, the explosive music sounded, and the dance floor returned to its luxurious scene. Someone put his arm around Wenxia's waist and danced closely with her. Wenxia must have drunk too much, her eyes were blurry, and she put her hand on the man's shoulder. The man seemed to be encouraged, his movements became more and more ambiguous, and his hand moved down along her waistline. "R." With a scream, the man's hand had already moved away from Wenxia. Yang Wenju had a gloomy face and kicked the man hard in the lower body. The people around screamed and scattered. When Wenxia saw the man being beaten, she grabbed another man and said, "Follow me." The man was already frightened out of his wits. He quickly pushed her away and ran away as if for his life. The man lying on the ground covered his lower body and stood up with difficulty, pointing at Yang Wenju. "Fuck you, you dare to hit me. If you have the guts, don't leave." Yang Wenju looked at him with disdain. "Get lost if you don't want to die." Wenxia wanted to find someone to dance with, so Yang Wenju took off his coat and put it on her. Wenxia struggled, but he grabbed her shoulders. Wenxia struggled again. "Yang Wenju, I don't want you to control me." Yu Wei's eyes dimmed a little. Only when you like someone can you have the desire to possess them. In the end, he still couldn't let go of Wenxia in his heart. Yang Wenju had a sullen face and walked out with his long legs. Before he reached the door, the man who had just been beaten came chasing after him with a group of people, each holding something in his hand. The people around them all avoided it. "Damn it, beat me to death soon." Yu Wei picked up her cell phone and walked towards Yangju while calling the police. Yao Lin also hurriedly picked up her camera and followed. Yang Wenju protected Wenxia behind him and was soon surrounded by a dozen people. He didn't bring any bodyguards. "Weren't you very arrogant just now? I'm going to see who dies here today." Yang Wenju sneered, "Just you guys." The man gritted his teeth in anger. "Come on together. Beat him to death." A group of people rushed towards Yang Wenju like hungry wolves pouncing on their prey. Yang Wenju dodged the attack nimbly. Wenxia, who was standing behind him, was staggering. She was drunk and pushed him hard. "Yang Wenju, who are you to me? Why do you care about me?" Yang Wenju grabbed her, but gave the other side an opportunity to take advantage of him. Bang! Yang Wenju frowned as his arm was hit hard by the iron rod. "Yang Wenju!" Wenxia screamed in fear and dared not move anymore. When Yu Wei saw that Yang Wenju was injured, she said to Yao Lin, "Wait for me here," and ran over quickly. She rushed to Yang Wenju, looked at the people staring at her eagerly, and said calmly, "I have called the police, they will be here soon. If you don't want to be arrested, get out of here." When Yang Wenju saw Yu Wei suddenly appear, his dark eyes darkened. "Who asked you to come here?" Who knew that when the man heard Yu Wei calling the police, he was not afraid at all, and gritted his teeth and said, "Didn't your mother tell you not to meddle in other people's business when you are out? Beat up this bitch too." Everyone immediately surrounded them again, and the target of attack became Yu Wei. Yang Wenju blocked her behind him, protecting two people, but it was obvious that he was unable to do so. Seeing that Yang Wenju was protecting both women, the man sneered, "Just attack those two women. Let's see who he can protect. The people on the opposite side were coming aggressively. One of them had a beer bottle in his hand and was staring at Yu Wei with a fierce look. Seeing this, Wenxia's watery eyes darkened. Seeing someone picking up a chair, she quietly moved to the side. The man who picked up the chair seized the opportunity and threw it in Wenxia's direction. Wenju! Wenxia shouted. The man holding the bottle saw that Yin Wenchu's attention was drawn away, so he aimed it at Yu Wei. Chapter 21. Do you delete it or do I delete it? Yu Wei was unable to dodge and her eyes widened in fear. Yang Wenchu's dark eyes darkened. He pushed Yu Wei away, then moved sideways to block Wenxia. Bang! The chair hit his back. Yu Wei staggered a step as he pushed her, and the beer bottle was about to sweep across her shoulder. The next second, someone grabbed her hair. Yu Wei's scalp seemed to be pulled off and her expression was in pain. When she saw Wenxia being protected in Yang Wenchu's arms, bitterness spread in her heart. The man patted her face and sneered, as expected, your girlfriend is the most important. See? This is what happens when you meddle in other people's business. Yu Wei closed her eyes in pain. This Yang Wenju is really good. Yao Lin saw it clearly in the crowd. When she saw Yu Wei being arrested, she cursed angrily, you bastard. She shouted, police comrade, right here, hurry up. There's a fight going on. Damn, you guys are lucky. The force on Yu Wei disappeared immediately, and a group of people ran away in a hurry. Yao Lin walked over to Yu Wei and supported her. Wei Wei, are you okay? Yu Wei's scalp tingled and she shook her head. Wenju, are you okay? Wenxia had already cried so much that her makeup was ruined. Does your back hurt? It's all my fault. Yang Wenju shook his head, and he endured the pain and walked to Yu Wei and Yao Lin. Yu Wei thought he would care about her, but she only heard his cold voice, bring the camera over here. Her heart instantly sank to the bottom, and Yu Wei finally found her voice again. Yang Wenju, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? Yang Wenchu's face was filled with anger. Is it fun to follow someone? Yu Wei's face turned pale. I'm not following anyone. Yao Lin was furious. Yang Wenju, it's fine that you didn't protect your wife just now, but now you come over here without even a word of concern, and you even have the nerve to frame someone. Yang Wenju looked at her coldly and said, if you don't want to be unemployed tomorrow, give me the camera. Yao Lin laughed in anger, how interesting. Why should I give you my camera? Yang Wenju was too lazy to talk nonsense with her and snatched her camera. Yao Lin wanted to get it back, but she couldn't reach it at all. Give me back my camera. Yang Wenju checked the photos and threw the camera into Yu Wei's arms with a sullen face. Do you want to delete it, or should I? Yu Wei mechanically picked up the camera and took a close-up photo, clearly capturing Wenxia dancing passionately with someone, a total of about 10 photos. She really had no way to defend herself. Yao Lin explained, I took the photo, it has nothing to do with Wei Wei. I was the one who asked Wei Wei out for a drink. Seeing that Yu Wei didn't move, Yang Wenju took the camera, deleted the photos, and threw them to Yao Lin. He looked at Yu Wei and said coldly, why, isn't it enough for your Yu family to destroy her once? Yu Wei seemed to have just come to her senses, and said bitterly, am I this kind of person in your eyes? Yang Wenju just looked at her coldly and turned away. Yao Lin took the camera and hurriedly checked the photos. Fortunately, Yang Wenju only deleted the photos related to Wenxia. Wenxia looked at Yu Wei and smiled sarcastically, with a gleam of victory in her eyes. Then he quickly turned around and followed, crying, Wenju, I'll take you to the hospital. I promise I won't act up again. Yao Lin looked at the two people's backs and was so angry that her teeth were itching. She originally wanted to help Wei Wei vent her anger, but ended up making things worse. Yao Lin supported Yu Wei and said apologetically, Wei Wei, I felt that Wenxia had gone too far in asking your mother to kneel down before, so. I had no idea that Yang Wenchu's eyes would be so sharp. How could he be vague about Wenxia's matter? Although it was too much for Wenxia to ask her mother to kneel down, but since Yu Mo didn't have to go to jail, she naturally wouldn't hold onto the matter. Yu Wei blinked her sore eyes, smiled self-deprecatingly, and turned around and walked towards the booth. Yao Lin followed over. Wei Wei, are you okay? What can I do? Yu Wei smiled, drink with me again. You were hospitalized for gastroenteritis a while ago, so drink less. Yu Wei poured a glass of wine and said, don't worry, I know my limits. What sense of propriety do you have? Have you forgotten that you drank for the first time on your 18th birthday? You drank too much and went crazy, and vomited all over Brother Hechuan. Only Brother Hechuan had a good temper and didn't despise you. Yu Wei's eyes dimmed, because no one would tolerate her unconditionally anymore, so she was very sensible now. It was already past 1 o'clock in the morning when she finished drinking. Yu Wei did not return to the old house, but went back to the villa. Her stomach ached a little, so she took a few pills. The next morning, Yao Lin called her and said that she was called to the police station to record her statement, and that the group of people from last night were all arrested. Yu Wei, the person involved in the incident, did not receive any notification from the police. I guess it was Yang Wenju who gave the notification. Yu Wei called old Madame Yang and said that she had a cold and was afraid of infecting others, so she wanted to move back to the villa. Madame Yang gave her instructions for a long time before hanging up the phone. In the next few days, Yu Wei communicated with Song Qingher's previous medical team and improved the treatment plan. After giving Song Qingher acupuncture, Yu Wei put the needles back into the acupuncture bag. Song Qingher sat on the bed and looked at her tenderly. How long have you been studying medicine? I have been with my grandfather since I was a child, and I have been influenced by him. No wonder you're so young. Yu Wei said in a cold voice, Mr. Yang has already conducted a detailed investigation on me before asking me to treat you. Don't worry. Song Qingher shook her head, I don't doubt your ability. Yu Wei put away her things. Song Qingher suddenly coughed violently a few times. Yu Wei leaned over to help her smooth her back. Song Qingher stopped coughing and panted slightly, Do you hate me very much? Yu Wei shook her head. Song Qingher smiled and said, I met Tingsong's son once. He hated me very much. I thought his wife should hate me too. Yu Wei said calmly, I'm just a doctor here. Song Qingher was puzzled. Love someone and love his dog, and vice versa. Your relationship isn't good. Yu Wei's eyes paused, thinking of how Yang Wenju pushed her away without hesitation and protected Wenxia. Is there any love between them? Seeing that Yu Wei was unwilling to talk more, Song Qingher just said softly, If it's difficult for you to treat me, I can go and tell Ting Song. Don't let me affect your relationship. After all, it's not easy for two people to be together. Yu Wei still shook her head, This is a very fair deal. But I felt it was a little funny that a third party would actually worry about other people's marital relationship. When she returned to the villa, it was already past 7 o'clock in the evening, and the servant handed her some invitations. Yu Wei looked through them. Some required her to attend with Yang Wenju, while some she could handle alone. Seeing her put down the invitation, the servant reminded her, Madam, the lady has specifically instructed that you should accompany her to the charity dinner hosted by Feng Yang magazine. Yu Wei frowned. She had been married to Yang Wenju for 3 years, and Shen Meiling seldom attended the same events with her. Even if they met occasionally, Shen Meiling would at most look at her with disdain when she greeted her. Yu Wei suddenly remembered that Yao Lin had mentioned that Wenxia would be the deputy editor-in-chief of a magazine after returning to China. Coincidentally, it was Feng Yang. Chapter 22, 4 People Date. Yu Wei did not plan to attend. She went into the small kitchen of the villa and cooked a bowl of clear soup noodles. When she was halfway through eating, she heard the servant in the front hall calling Mr. Yang. The noodles in my mouth seemed to lose their taste in an instant. The man changed his shoes and went upstairs. Yu Wei breathed a sigh of relief and continued to eat noodles. After eating the noodles, she went upstairs and saw Yang Wenju sitting on the edge of the bed in the bedroom, his upper body naked, with the redness and swelling on his back clearly visible. Yu Wei wanted to turn a blind eye, but Yang Wenju ordered in a cold voice, Come and help me apply the medicine. Yu Wei hesitated for a moment, walked over to get the ointment, and applied it to the red marks on his back. It had been a few days and the marks were still a little swollen. It seemed that he had used a lot of force that time. The feud between the Yu family and Xia ends here. Yang Wenju suddenly spoke with a commanding tone, Don't treat Xia as your imaginary enemy anymore. I won't tolerate you forever. Yu Wei paused. He really thought that she wanted to take revenge on Wenxia. Imaginary enemy. Even if you divorce me, you can't marry her. Why should I treat her as an enemy? Wang Shuman was born in an ordinary family. She was once a popular female star. Later, she retired from the screen and married into the Wen family. Although the Wen family is not as powerful as the Yang family, it is also a leader among the wealthy families in the imperial capital. Later, the Wen family went bankrupt. Less than half a year later, she took Wen Xia and married the middle-aged widowed eldest brother of the Yang family. Because his father Yang Tingsong is the head of the Yang group and his mother Shen Meiling is backed by a wealthy Shen family, Yang Wenju has been trained to be the heir of the Yang family since he was a child. The Yang family would not allow him to marry his uncle's stepdaughter, especially since the Wen family behind Wen Xia had long disappeared from the imperial capital. Yang Wenshu's face darkened and he grabbed her wrist. So you only care about whether I will divorce you for her? Yu Wei looked calm. What else should I care about? Shouldn't I care that when she is in danger, the first person you want to protect is her instead of me? Yang Wenju grabbed her wrist tightly. Do you care? Yu Wei thought of the moment when he pushed her away and asked, what woman wouldn't want her husband to put her first? Yang Wenju looked at her calm expression, sneered, and let go of her hand. Why should I put you first? Do you deserve it? Yang Wenju put on his shirt and left the bedroom. Yu Wei put the ointment aside, her eyes sore. She had worked hard for 3 years and never longed for him to treat her like a treasure. Why was he so stingy with giving her the most basic respect? Yang Wenju did not return to the bedroom, but slept in the guest room all night. The next morning, Yang Wenju wanted to take her out. His attitude was irresistible, so Yu Wei had to change her clothes to keep him company. The two of them sat in the back seat of the car, each occupying one side, and neither of them had any intention of paying attention to the other. The car stopped outside an art gallery. The two got out of the car. Before Yu Wei could react, Yang Wenju had already grabbed her hand and she couldn't get away. Third brother, third sister-in-law. Wen Xia smiled and waved to the two of them. She was holding the arm of a young man. Her eyes swept over their clasped hands, and her smile froze a little. Wen Xia came over with the man and introduced them to the others with a smile. This is my boyfriend, Shang Lei, and this is my third brother and sister-in-law. Mr. Yang, Mrs. Yang. Shang Lei politely shook hands with the two. He calmly pinched Yu Wei's fingertips. I have heard that Mrs. Yang is a beauty. After seeing her today, I find that she is indeed as beautiful as her reputation has been. Yu Wei frowned and pulled her hand back. Thank you. Wen Xia smiled and looked at Yu Wei. Third sister-in-law, Shang Lei and I are not very familiar with each other. It always feels a bit awkward for two people to get along, so I want to have a 4-person date. You don't mind, right? Does she mind? Aren't he all the people here? Yu Wei shook her head. The four of them walked into the art museum together. Yang Wenju held her hand the whole time, while Wen Xia held Shang Lei's arm intimately. The art gallery exhibits landscape paintings. Yu Wei remembered that her grandfather's favorite thing was landscape painting, and that he had a lot of it collected in the clinic, so she couldn't help but slow down her pace. Seeing that her eyes were much brighter, Yang Wenju also slowed down his pace. Yu Wei looked at the paintings one by one and couldn't help but think that if her grandfather were still alive, he would definitely like some paintings and dislike some. Seeing Yu Wei staying in front of a painting for nearly a minute, Yang Wenju moved closer to her and asked, "Do you like this one?" Her hand felt the warmth of his palm. He was very close to her. A faint woody scent came from her nose. Yu Wei was a little dazed. The two of them looked like an ordinary couple. She nodded. It's a pity that the paintings here are only exhibited, not sold. Yang Wenju glanced at the painting again and said disdainfully, Mrs. Yang's taste is really not that good. Yu Wei wanted to pull her hand back, but he held it too tightly. Wen Xia followed Shang Lei, talking about paintings with him and laughing. Shang Lei's hand was on her waist at some point, and it moved lower and lower as the two walked. Wen Xia seemed not to notice anything and continued chatting and laughing with him. However, Yu Wei felt the air pressure around her was getting lower and lower. When we came out of the exhibition hall, it was almost noon and Shang Lei had already booked a private restaurant. The four of them sat down and the food was served. Shang Lei smiled and picked up some food for Wen Xia. Their fried asparagus with shrimp is delicious, you should try it. Wen Xia took a bite and said, it tastes really good, thank you. Yang Wenshu's right arm was still injured and he had difficulty moving. He glanced at Yu Wei. Yu Wei didn't want to pay attention to him, but there was a hand on her waist, kneading it lightly. Yu Wei's cheeks blushed slightly as she picked up some food and put it on his plate. Yang Wenju leaned close to her ear and whispered, feed me. Shang Lei on the other side smiled and said, Boss Yang and Mrs. Yang are really in love. Yang Wenju glanced at Yu Wei's slightly red cheeks and smiled, but the strength of his hands increased a little. Young couples are naturally affectionate. Yu Wei's cheeks turned even redder, and she finally couldn't bear it anymore, so she picked up a piece of fish and put it to his lips. Yang Wenju took his time to eat the fish, but stared at her. It's delicious. Yu Wei resigned herself to feeding him. Yang Wenju leaned casually on the back of the chair. His hand was on her lower back, and his slender fingers teased her vaguely. Yu Wei felt very uncomfortable. When Sia looked at the loving appearance of the two people, and the smile on her face finally couldn't be suppressed, she suddenly stood up and said, "I'm going to the bathroom." Yu Wei took another bite of beef and put it to his lips. Unexpectedly, Yang Wenju suddenly stood up and bumped into Yu Wei's chopsticks. The beef covered with soup rolled down instantly and landed on the chest of Yu Wei's white shirt, spreading the stain. Yang Wenju didn't care at all and walked away with his long legs. Shang Lei brought over a napkin and said, "Mrs. Yang, are you okay?" Yu Wei did not take it, but took the napkin from her lap, turned slightly, and said in a cold voice, "I'll do it myself, thank you." This Shang Lei didn't give her a good impression. Yu Wei wiped it a few times, but the soup had already seeped in and could not be wiped clean. The mark on her chest was too obvious. Shang Lei did not return to his seat, but still stood beside her. When he saw her finish wiping, he spoke slowly, "Mrs. Yang, do you think we are redundant?" Chapter 23, Teach Me to be a Cuckold. Yu Wei couldn't help but look up at Shang Lei. Shang Lei moved closer to her, with a playful look in his eyes. "They are competing with each other and making fun of us. Why don't we retaliate against them?" Yu Wei's face turned cold. "Mr. Shang, I don't know what you are talking about." "Mrs. Yang, why do you have to deceive yourself?" Shang Lei looked at Yu Wei. Yu Wei was very beautiful, but her temperament was cold. Her watery eyes seemed to contain thousands of words, yet they were also cold and distant, which could easily arouse a man's desire to conquer her. In this circle, he has seen all kinds of beauties and slept with many of them, but this is the first time he has seen someone as seductive as Yu Wei. "I've heard about Yang Wenju and Wenxia. Yang Wenju doesn't take you seriously as his wife at all." Shang Lei persuaded, "It's clear that he doesn't have you in his eyes or heart. It's better to find someone else to love you well." Yu Wei's face turned completely cold. "Mr. Shang, please be careful. You and Wenxia should still be in the contact stage. If you feel that you are not suitable for her, you can break up." "Why?" "Yu Wei." Wenxia looked at her angrily. "What do you mean?" Yu Wei raised her head and saw that Wenxia and Yang Wenju had returned. When Yang Wenju saw Shang Lei leaning over Yu Wei and the two of them were quite close to each other, his face immediately darkened. He quickly walked over and pulled Yu Wei up from the chair. Wenxia looked at her with hatred. "I've only been gone for a while, and you can't wait to seduce my boyfriend. Do you like to steal my things so much?" Shang Lei hurriedly said, "Sia, don't get me wrong, Mrs. Yang's clothes were stained by something, I just helped her wipe it." Only then did Yang Wenju notice that there was a mark on the left side of Yu Wei's shirt. "Wipe it." Thinking of Shang Lei's hand touching here before, Yang Wenju grabbed Yu Wei's wrist tightly. "You don't have hands yourself." Yu Wei hurriedly explained, "I didn't ask him to wipe it for me." Wenxia laughed mockingly, "I didn't help you wipe it. Do you need to be so close to talk?" "Yu Wei, I know you hate me for making your mother kneel down in front of me. But that's what your family owes me." Yu Wei wanted to explain, but Shang Lei spoke before her. "I saw that Mrs. Yang seemed to be in a bad mood, so I comforted her a few words." "Sia, don't think too much." "Comfort?" Yang Wenju's face turned colder. "You're my boyfriend, why do you keep speaking for her?" When Sia looked at Shang Lei dissatisfiedly, "Do you really want to listen to her and break up with me? Mrs. Yang does have some misunderstandings about you." Shang Lei looked at Yu Wei. "Mrs. Yang, although I don't have much contact with Sai Ya, I really like her and I will not break up with her." Yu Wei didn't expect that Shang Lei, a grown man, would actually confuse right and wrong. When Sia turned around and said pitifully, "Yu Wei, I have already started a new life, why are you still unwilling to let me go? Can't you just stand me being okay?" "I didn't, he had bad intentions." Yang Wenju grabbed Yu Wei's wrist and without giving her a chance to explain, dragged her out of the restaurant. Yang Wenju threw her into the car with a gloomy face, then sat next to her and told the driver to drive back to the villa. Yang Wenju! Shut up! Yu Wei knew that he was angry, so she simply didn't explain any further. The car drove into the villa and Yang Wenju dragged her back to the bedroom. Yu Wei looked at his dark face and stepped back subconsciously. If I say that Xiang Lei noticed that there was something wrong between you and Wenxia, so he wanted to instigate me to cheat on you, would you believe it? Yang Wenju untied his tie with one hand and sneered, who has an abnormal relationship with whom? You'd better make it clear to me. Yu Wei shook her head. I didn't instigate Xiang Lei to break up with Wenxia. It was Xiang Lei who. I'm not deaf. Yang Wenxu's eyes fell on her white shirt, his eyes deep. Take off your clothes. Yu Wei continued to back away, shaking her head. Yang Wenju looked at her angrily. Yu Mo kidnapped her and humiliated her, but she endured it. Your mother just kowtowed to her a few times, and you can't tolerate it. It's just a few kowtows. Although I know that he looks down on the Yu family, she is her biological mother and his elder. How can he say this lightly? That's my mother? Yu Wei clenched her palms. I would rather be the one to kowtow to her. Besides, Yu Mo never did those things to her. Her chin was suddenly pinched, and Yu Wei's face wrinkled in pain. You believe whatever Yu Mo says. Can't you see the scars on her body? Yu Wei looked straight at him. You are the same, you believe whatever Wenxia says. Yang Wenju put more force on his hands. I said, I won't tolerate you forever. Yu Wei looked painful. Have you ever tolerated me? Yang Wenju, when have you ever had any regard for me in your eyes or heart? Yang Wenju looked at her and suddenly smiled. You want me to have you in my heart? Don't you know that you reap what you sow? Besides conspiracy and calculation, there is also a hypocritical mask. What have you given me? Yu Wei felt a pang in her heart. I have never plotted against you. Yang Wenju taunted. Then how did you get to be Mrs. Yang? Yu Wei shook her head. Why don't you believe me? I believed you were pregnant, so I married you, but what happened? Yang Wenju sneered and pushed her into the bathroom. You really have an innocent face for nothing. Yu Wei wanted to escape, but was pulled back by him. Yang Wenju frowned and tied her two slender wrists with a tie and wrapped them around the wall lamp. If you haven't experienced it, how can you know what kind of mistake Yu Mo made? Yu Wei struggled violently when she heard his words. Seeing the cruel look in the man's eyes, Yu Wei said fearfully, Yang Wenju, what do you want to do? Yang Wenju looked at her pale face. Are you scared? Sai Wei was also scared when she was locked in that dark room. Yu Wei shook her head subconsciously. I didn't follow her, nor did I instigate others to break up with her. Yang Wenju, you believe me, okay. Besides your chest, where else did he touch you? I didn't let him touch me. Yang Wenju pinched her cheek and said, if you dare to cheat on me, I will make your Yu family disappear completely from the imperial capital. Just as Yu Wei was about to speak, her lips were sealed. The punishing kiss had no warmth at all. The root of her tongue was numb and her lips were sore. Yu Wei couldn't break free, so she simply bit him. The smell of blood spread, and Yang Wenju let go of her in pain. Yu Wei gasped. He refused to believe her and wanted to humiliate her for Wenxia. Yu Wei's eyes were red. Yang Wenju, even if I am your wife, you can't force me if I don't want to. If you dare to mess around, I will sue you. Yang Wenju looked at her little face that was flushed with anger, and slowly unbuttoned his shirt. Sue me? Madam Yang is really arrogant. Do you want me to recommend a lawyer to you? Yu Wei turned her head away. Let me go. How about we find attorney Meng? Chapter 24 The difference between love and not love. There was a hint of embarrassment in Yu Wei's eyes, and her face turned paler and paler. Yang Wenju looked into her eyes and continued, when the time comes, tell him in detail how I forced you. In the 3 years of marriage, did you enjoy every time I forced you? Yang Wenju. Of course, even if you enjoyed it, as long as you say you didn't do it voluntarily, I think attorney Meng should be able to understand you. Yu Wei turned her head away and said in a hoarse voice, he is just an ordinary friend of mine. Yang Wenju lifted her chin, wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth, and smiled sarcastically. Even if he is just an ordinary friend, he must be happy to help you. Her lips were kissed again and Yu Wei closed her eyes in despair. When Yu Wei opened her eyes again, it was already evening. The servant sorted out the clothes of the two people from the bathroom. The white silk shirt had been torn by Yang Wenju and could no longer be worn. Yang Wenju was no longer in the villa. Yu Wei turned over in bed, tears dripping from the corners of her eyes onto the pillow, quickly spreading out. If he hadn't been injured, he probably wouldn't have let her go so soon. Even though she knew that he wouldn't believe anything she said, she still couldn't help feeling sad. When Sia didn't even need to say anything, just crying was enough to make him lose his composure. Maybe this is the difference between love and not love. After the servant cleaned the bathroom, he brought the medicine and the cup of water to Yu Wei. "Madam, the master has instructed that you take the medicine when you wake up." Yu Wei laughed at herself. Under such circumstances, Yang Wenju was afraid that she would get pregnant with his child. Yu Wei sat up and took the medicine. The red mark on her slender wrist was shocking. After drinking the medicine, Yu Wei no longer felt the bitterness she had felt before. Having stayed in the bathroom for too long, Yu Wei caught a cold the next morning. She greeted Yang Tingsong and slept soundly all day. The thought of divorce flashed through my mind countless times. Of course, she didn't think that Yang Wenju refused to divorce her because he liked her. He didn't love her, and even hated her, but he would not allow her to dump him. She still has the Yu family behind her, she can't take any risks. In fact, as long as he doesn't cheat, it doesn't matter even if he has someone else in his heart. It has been like this for the past 3 years anyway, but why does she seem to care more and more? After recovering a little, Yu Wei drove to the clinic to get something. When she saw that the door of the clinic was not locked and Yu Wei's car was not locked, she hurried in. In the clinic, more than a dozen people were sorting things out. Grandpa's medical books and a lot of information were all thrown on the ground at random, like a pile of garbage waiting to be disposed of. "Who are you?" Yu Wei's voice trembled with anger. "Who told you to touch the things inside?" "Someone came over and negotiated with Yu Wei. Mr. Yu has already sold the house, and we are here to take it back." "What did you say?" Yu Wei took a step back in shock. "The Mr. Yu you're talking about is Yu Haishan." "Right." Yu Wei calmed herself down and said, "Tell your people to stop immediately. The Yu family won't sell their house. I'm Yu Wei, Mr. Yu's daughter. I'm sorry, the transfer procedures for the house have been completed. Now their house no longer belongs to the Yu family. Have the formalities been completed?" It took Yu Wei a long while to find her voice again. "Who owns the house now?" The man shook his head. "No comment." Yu Wei held onto the doorframe to prevent herself from falling. She calmed herself down and called Yu Haishan. "Dad, did you sell the clinic?" Yu Haishan said helplessly, Wei Wei, your grandfather is gone anyway, and you don't plan to practice medicine. This house is just sitting there idle. You know we still owe the Gu family a lot of money. If someone offers a high price, I will sell it." Yu Wei's voice trembled. "Dad, this is the old house of the Yu family. Grandpa's life's work is here. How can you just sell it without even telling me? The Yu family's clinic is located in a prosperous area where every inch of land is valuable. There is a courtyard in the back and a storefront in the front. The area is not too large. Over the years, many people have wanted to buy this courtyard house, but my grandfather never gave in. First, the Yu family is not short of money. Second, Grandpa said that this is the Yu family's roots and cannot be lost. After Grandpa died, the yard was named after Yu Haishan." Yu Haishan sighed. "Wei Wei, have you forgotten how your grandfather died? He was a good man all his life, and he only wrote prescriptions for patients without charging any fees, but what was the result?" Yu Wei calmed down and asked in a cold voice, "How much money did the other party give?" Yu Haishan was silent for a moment, then said, "If it's just the house for 70 million, plus the things your grandfather left behind, it'll be 100 million. Wei Wei, you also know that we still owe the Gu family a lot of money. If we can't pay it back, the Yu family will go bankrupt." Yu Wei felt bitter in her heart. "Dad, we can think of other ways to pay back the money, but how can you have your eyes on the old house? Even if you have to sell their house, how can you sell the things that Grandpa left behind?" Yu Haishan said indifferently, "Those things are not valuable anyway. Isn't Grandpa's life's hard work worth money? They are obviously priceless treasures." Yu Wei felt very uncomfortable. "Who is the buyer?" "Wei Wei, all the formalities have been completed. The clinic is now theirs." Yu Wei held the phone tightly. "Who is the buyer?" Yu Haishan knew he couldn't hide it, so he said helplessly, "It was Manager Sun who came to negotiate." "Manager Sun?" Yu Wei paused. "Shen Meiling's assistant." "Wei Wei, the price your mother-in-law gave is much higher than the market price. It seems that she is willing to help our Yu family, otherwise I would not sell it so readily." Yu Wei cut off the call. "Shen Meiling helped the Yu family? What a joke. Seeing someone moving Grandpa's medical books out, Yu Wei rushed over and said, "You can't touch anything here. Miss, please don't interfere with our work." Yu Wei opened her arms and blocked the door, saying firmly, "I will communicate with the buyer. No one can touch anything in this house. The house no longer belongs to your Yu family. If you make trouble again, don't blame us for being rude to you. I said you can't move, and you can't move." Yu Wei stood firmly at the door. In her mind was the image of her grandfather sitting in front of the lamp and sorting out the documents bit by bit after seeing the patients every day. "Those are things that Grandpa wrote down one by one, no one can take them away. The things have all been sold. It's not up to you to decide whether we can move them or not." Someone came over and pushed Yu Wei. Yu Wei staggered a step but refused to leave the door. Someone was about to come over and pull her away, but Yu Wei said coldly, "I will sue anyone who dares to touch me for molestation." The clinic is on the street and soon attracted a lot of people. The leading man made a phone call and then said to Yu Wei, "The things here have been sold. We have already counted them. Miss Yu, please do not move them. Otherwise, it will be considered stealing." The man said and asked everyone to leave. Yu Wei breathed a sigh of relief and slumped down on the ground. She put all of her grandfather's things back to their original places. She knew that Shen Meiling bought the clinic for 100 million yuan, but she couldn't buy it back with 100 million yuan. Yu Wei locked the clinic again and drove to their villa halfway up the mountain. Chapter 25. Who will the child resemble more? Song Qingher's complexion looked much better than in the previous few days. After Yu Wei gave her acupuncture, she adjusted the prescription and diet for her. Before leaving, Yu Wei mentioned the matter of the clinic to Yang Tingsong. Yang Tingsong did not refuse. "If you need, I can help you communicate, but you also know that I have no relationship with her. If I help you, it may backfire. You might as well let Wenju help you." Yu Wei didn't have much hope in the first place. Yang Tingsong had already got what he wanted, so naturally he wouldn't bother helping her anymore. Isn't there even less affection between her and Yang Wenju? Shen Meiling has not answered Yu Wei's calls. Yu Wei went to look for her several times, but she refused to see her. After Yang Wenju left that day, he never returned to the villa. Yu Wei was worried, so she asked Yu Mo to guard outside the clinic. It was not until the day of the charity dinner held by Feng Yang magazine that Shen Meiling finally answered her call. "If you want to get the clinic back, just come to the dinner." Yu Wei hadn't planned to attend, so she didn't prepare a dress specially. She was not in the mood to style her hair, so she just chose a plain white tight-fitting long dress, put on some simple makeup, and tied her hair up with a hairpin, looking very Chinese. Shen Meiling was waiting for her outside the red carpet. Yu Wei walked over and took her arm. Shen Meiling smiled gently at the camera and was immediately captured by the camera. Their mother-in-law and daughter-in-law walked to the background wall to take photos. The reporters were whispering, "This Wenxia is really amazing." Everyone in the circle knows about the gossips between Yang Wenju and her. Yang Wenju's mother even brought his wife to help. Could it be that Wenxia has become a non-staff member? After all, in this circle, it is not uncommon for a man to keep several women outside, not to mention a man of such a noble status as Yang Wenju. Yu Wei followed Shen Meiling and smiled in a formal manner. Finally walking into the backstage, Shen Meiling glanced at her, and Yu Wei tactfully withdrew her hand. The waiter led the two to the table. After they sat down, Yu Wei noticed that Yin Wenju was sitting next to Wenxia at the next table. Wenxia was wearing a water ink green long dress and delicate makeup, looking very beautiful and flamboyant. Yang Wenju was wearing a suit of the same color and sitting casually on a chair, looking elegant and noble. "I heard someone say, Wenxia is a new official, is Yang Wenju here to support her? Boss Yang really cares about this little sister." Someone laughed and said, "Then you better tell me clearly what kind of sister you are." The conversation faded away. "Look, they are such a perfect match." Shen Meiling said slowly, "Do you want to help them?" Yu Wei's face was stiff, and she looked away. "The clinic is my grandfather's life's work. I hope you can be kind enough to let me buy it back." Shen Meiling moved closer to her and said, "You want to buy back the clinic? I'll give you this opportunity." Shen Meiling looked at her pale face and smiled, "Don't be nervous." Yu Wei looked at the smile on her face, but felt cold all over. "Actually, if you think about it, we really are in the same boat." Shen Meiling shook her wine glass and said nonchalantly, "My husband has a white moonlight in his heart, and we can only watch them show their affection. Yu Wei clenched her palms. Wenxia is an orphan, so naturally she cannot marry Wenju as his wife. But Wenju loves her deeply. And you have the status of a banquet wife, but Wenju hates you and even refuses to let you have a child. Shen Mailing handed Yu Wei a glass of wine, and Yu Wei tried to calm herself down and took it. A gentleman should help others achieve their goals. Shen Mailing clinked glasses with her. Tell me, if Wenxia gave birth to Wenju's child, who would the child look more like? Yu Wei clenched the wine glass tightly, and the chill penetrated her heart. Shen Mailing took a sip of wine, then held Yu Wei's trembling hand. Yu Wei felt something in her palm. Shen Mailing looked at her with a smile, like a loving elder, and touched her hair. Wenju likes Wenxia so much, so he naturally doesn't want her to be the third party, so we need to help him. Remember to give him the drink. As long as things are done, the clinic will still belong to the Yu family. This is simply ridiculous. Yu Wei stood up in panic, bang! A waiter was serving wine, and the wine glasses fell to the ground. I'm sorry. Yu Wei apologized quickly and subconsciously wanted to help clean up. Shen Mailing also stood up, grabbed her arm, and continued in her ear, just let them sort it out. Remember, I will only give you one chance. Yu Wei's face was pale as she staggered towards the bathroom. Yang Wenju heard the noise and looked over, but he only had time to see the back that looked like it would be blown down by the wind at any time. Yang Wenju frowned. He was indeed very angry and a little impulsive at the beginning of that day, but it had been several days. Could it be that she was still not feeling well? Yang Wenju wanted to get up and follow him, but Wenxia grabbed his arm and said, Wenju, it's my turn to speak later. Where are you going? Yu Wei walked to the sink outside the bathroom and washed her face with cold water before calming down. She took out what Shen Mailing handed to her, a small transparent glass bottle containing a white medicine pill. Shen Mailing was Yang Wenju's biological mother, so she naturally would not give him poison. It was self-evident what this medicine was. Thinking about how he deliberately humiliated and tortured her before they separated last time, maybe he and Wenxia would get what they wanted and might even agree to a divorce. The thought only flashed through my mind. How could she possibly send her husband to another woman's bed with her own hands? If she went to ask Yang Wenju for help, would he help her? He would probably just say that she had it all her own way. Are you feeling unwell? Yang Wenju's voice disrupted her chaotic thoughts. Yu Wei turned around in a panic and blocked the medicine bottle behind her. Noticing her movements, his eyes darkened. What are you blocking? Yu Wei was stunned for a moment, then stretched out a hand, deliberately showing the red mark on it. What are you talking about? Yang Wenju's face looked a little unnatural. Although his actions were a bit harsh that day, he also paid attention to the degree, except for her tied wrists. If you're not feeling well, don't push yourself. Yu Wei clenched the thing in her palm. Did he have a change of heart? Yu Wei asked hopefully, I do feel a little uncomfortable now. Yang Wenju, can you take me away? Yang Wenju's face immediately darkened. Don't push your luck. Yu Wei's eyes dimmed a lot. Today was Wenxia's big day. How could he go with her? Do you care about Wenxia so much? I told you not to treat her as your imaginary enemy. Yang Wenju looked a little impatient. Since you are not feeling well, I will ask the driver to take you home first. Yu Wei shook her head palely. No, I'm fine. Whatever you want. Yang Wenju looked at her submissive appearance, feeling annoyed, and turned around and walked away in big strides. When Yu Wei returned to the banquet hall, Shen Mailing was already greeting people with a smile. She sat quietly in her seat, as if she didn't exist. Wenxia had just finished her speech when the audience burst into warm applause. She walked off the stage happily like a beautiful butterfly, and under everyone's surprised gaze, she pounced on Yang Wenju. Chapter 26, Trampling You in the Mud for Me. Yang Wenju was afraid that she would fall, so he subconsciously held her waist with one hand. Someone pressed the shutter and the picture froze. Their hug between a handsome man and a beautiful woman is as beautiful as a painting. Yu Wei blinked her sore eyes. Yang Wenju only supported Wenxia for a moment, then straightened her up and said, Pay attention to the occasion. Wenxia looked at him with a smile. Can I hug you in other occasions? Yang Wenju's eyes darkened. Sigh, you have overstepped the boundaries. The smile on Wenxia's face froze, but she soon regained her composure and said, Sorry, I'm just too happy. As beautiful music sounded, people walked towards the dance floor one after another. When Sia grabbed Yang Wenshu's arm and said, "I don't want any other gifts. Just dance with me as a celebration for me, okay?" Yang Wenju did not move. When Sia looked at him, her eyes slowly turning red. "I've listened to you, going on blind dates, dating, and even getting married in the future. Don't you even want to dance with me?" Yang Wenshu's expression relaxed and he finally walked towards the dance floor with her. Yu Wei looked at the two people walking on the dance floor, a little absent-minded. She remembered that a long time ago, at a grand dinner party, the man she had loved for a long time also gently put his arms around a woman's waist, danced gracefully, and looked at the woman with the most gentle and affectionate eyes. Tears welled up, my vision gradually blurred, and the two images seemed to overlap little by little across time and space. She felt a slight pain in her heart, and she had forgotten how long it had been since she had felt this way. Suppressing the bitterness deep in her heart, Yu Wei wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes and wanted to get up and leave. Shen Meiling held her shoulders and handed her a glass of wine. "Put the food in there. After Wenju finishes dancing, go and give him a toast." Yu Wei looked at the glass of wine as if she was seeing a monster. "Think about your grandfather's clinic." Shen Meiling held her shoulders tightly. "I don't know any medical skills. It's best to burn useless things. Don't you think so?" Yu Wei's heart sank to the bottom and burned. "Those were all the hard work left by my grandfather, and they were all gone in a fire." Shen Meiling left leisurely. She had long understood that Shen Meiling would not let her go easily, but she did not expect Shen Meiling to target the clinic. Yu Wei was silent for a long while, gently pushed the glass of wine handed to her by Shen Meiling, took another glass of wine and stood up. As soon as she stood up, she ran into Wenxia who was walking towards her. Wenxia lifted her skirt and looked at her with a smile. "Third sister-in-law, thank you for coming, but you don't look very well, are you feeling unwell?" Yu Wei shook her head. "I'm fine." Wenxia smiled brightly. "Wenju seemed very angry when he took you away that day. He didn't do anything to you, did he?" "Wenju has always been like this. He won't let me suffer even the slightest injustice. As long as someone bullies me, he will definitely pay it back double." Yu Wei looked at the smile on her face and said calmly, "Isn't he the one who gave you your greatest grievance?" This sentence froze the smile on Wenxia's face. It took her a long while to come back to her senses. She whispered in Yu Wei's ear, "What are you so proud of? He married you only because he couldn't marry me, so it doesn't matter who he marries. But as long as you make me feel wronged, believe it or not, he can trample you into the mud for me." How could she not believe it? The red mark on the wrist is so eye-catching. Yu Wei turned sideways and walked forward. Yang Wenju came over and took the wine from her hand naturally. Seeing Yu Wei looking at the wine glass in his hand, Yang Wenju raised his eyebrows. "Isn't it for me?" Yu Wei came back to her senses. "Of course it's for you." Yang Wenju took a sip of wine and looked at her pale face with an unnatural expression. "Do you want me to take you to the hospital for a checkup?" Yu Wei realized what he was saying, and her expression became a little unnatural. "No, I'm fine now." Yang Wenju returned to his cold and distant look. "I just want you to know where my bottom line is. If you still want to continue to be your wife, don't touch it." Of course she knew that his bottom line was Wenxia. Yu Wei couldn't help but ask, "If I am always Mrs. Yang, when will you be willing to have a child with me?" Yang Wenshu's face darkened completely. "Didn't you yell for a divorce a few days ago? Are you willing to divorce after having a child?" Yu Wei seemed not to hear his sarcasm and continued to ask, 1 year, or 2 years? Or impossible in this lifetime? This life? Yang Wenju sounded like he was joking. "So Mrs. Yang actually wants to spend her whole life with me?" Yu Wei said calmly, "Isn't the original intention of marriage that two people want to be together for a lifetime? At least that's what she thought at the moment she married him, and she has been working towards this goal." Yang Wenju took another sip of wine and mocked, "But the premise of marriage is that two people love each other, right? After 3 years, doesn't he have any feelings for her at all? Don't even think about the child." Yang Wenju drank the wine in the glass, not even bothering to give her another look, put down the glass and left. He refused to let her have children or get a divorce. He wanted to trap her in the cage of marriage. She was so stupid. How could a man as high and mighty as he be tolerate her deception? She actually thought that he would live with her without any grudges. Yu Wei saw him walking towards Wenxia and turned away. Shen Meiling blocked her way. "Where are you going in such a hurry?" Yu Wei said coldly, "Go home. Don't you want to watch the good show you directed yourself?" Yu Wei threw the small glass bottle into the trash can beside her and said, "I didn't put anything in the wine." Shen Meiling smiled and said, "Really? But I think Wenju seems a little drunk." Yu Wei turned around and saw that Yin Wenchu's tall body was a little unsteady on his feet. Wen Xia was standing beside him, supporting him, and asking something with concern. Yu Wei looked at her in surprise. "You? Me? Do you really think I will count on you?" Shen Meiling sneered, "You finally got the position of Mrs. Yang, how could you agree to let another woman bear Wenchu's child?" Yu Wei's face turned pale. How could she forget that Shen Meiling was a businessman who was very calculating? Once is strange, twice is familiar. Once Wenju takes this step, there will be no turning back. Shen Meiling looked at her coldly. "Do you think he will hate you because of this? From now on, you can only watch them get along well." Yu Wei felt cold all over and wanted to go back, but was blocked by 2 bodyguards. Shen Meiling adjusted her clothes gracefully. "You have to experience the pain I've suffered, and then you'll know what a stupid thing you've done." Yu Wei finally understood that from the moment she stepped into the dinner party, she had already walked into a trap set by Shen Meiling, and she could not escape at all. Waves of heat surged through Yang Wenchu's body, reminding him of his first time with Yu Wei 3 years ago. Who is so bold as to plot against him? "Wenju, what's wrong with you?" Wen Xia looked at him with concern. "Why are you sweating so much? Do you want me to help you go to the lounge in the back to rest for a while?" Chapter 27. Afraid of losing him. Yang Wenju subconsciously looked around for Yu Wei, but found nothing. His gaze fell on Wen Xia's worried face, and the concern in her eyes was genuine. Yang Wenju tried to stay calm. "I'm fine, I just don't feel well. Sorry, I can't accompany you to the party after the banquet." "It's okay, I'll go with you. You are the protagonist today, you can't leave early." Yang Wenju pushed her hand away. "Have fun. Wenju." Wen Xia could only watch him leave. Yang Wenju had just walked to the door of the banquet hall when a waiter came over, handed him a room card, and said respectfully, "Mr. Yang, Mrs. Yang asked me to tell you to wait for her in room 3050. Yang Wenchu's eyes dimmed a little, and the changes in his body became more and more obvious. Thinking of the glass of wine that Yu Wei handed him, Yang Wenju no longer hesitated, took the room card, and walked out of the banquet hall. Yang Wenju took the elevator to the floor, found the room, and swiped his card to enter. When I turned on the lights, I saw heart-shaped rose petals on the bed and an alluring fragrance in the air. Yu Wei's graceful figure flashed through Yang Wenju's mind, and his mouth became dry. He suppressed the growing heat in his heart, opened the window and let in some cool air. What tricks was this woman playing? Knock knock knock. There was a knock on the door. Yang Wenju walked over quickly and opened the door. "Yu Wei, you'd better." A slender figure threw herself into his arms, and Yang Wenju took 2 steps back. Click. The door closes and locks automatically. Wen Xia was still wearing the evening dress, but her cheeks were abnormally flushed. "Wenju, why do I feel so uncomfortable?" Yang Wenju tried hard to stay awake, pushed Wen Xia away, and asked in a deep voice, "Why are you here?" Sensing the reproach in his tone, Wen Xia said softly, "It was my 3rd sister-in-law who asked me to come to this room to find you." "What did you say?" Yang Wenchu's face was cold. Wen Xia wanted to wrap around him like a vine. "Wenju, I'm so hot now, I want to kiss you so much, don't you want to kiss me?" Looking at her bright red lips, Yang Wenju calmed down and pushed her away forcefully. "Sai Ya, wake up, we can't do this." "Why not?" "3rd sister-in-law asked me to come to you, which means she doesn't mind." Wen Xia looked at him with red eyes. "I don't mind either, Wenju, I don't have to be your wife, I just hope to be with you, any relationship is fine." She didn't expect Yu Wei to be so sensible. As long as Yang Wenju crossed the line with her tonight, she would be able to replace Yu Wei. Yang Wenju wanted to strangle Yu Wei to death right now. She didn't mind. Why shouldn't she mind? "I mind." Yang Wenju gritted his teeth and tried to keep himself awake. "Yu Wei, you stupid woman." Yang Wenju wanted to open the door, but Wen Xia blocked him and said, "I won't let you leave. Yang Wenju, if you dare to leave, I will find a man to sleep with today. Do you believe it?" Yang Wenchu's face darkened. "At any time, it is not worth degrading yourself for anyone, understand?" Wen Xia looked at him firmly. How could she let go of such a rare opportunity? She put her hands behind her back and undid the laces with one deft movement, letting the dress fall to the ground. Yang Wenju turned around the moment her dress fell off. "Wenxia, put on your clothes. I only want you. I just can't live without you." Wenxia desperately hugged him from behind. "Wenju, I know you have me in your heart. I know you don't want me to be the third party, but I don't care. Do you know how I have survived these years without you? What reputation, status, compared to you, is worthless?" Yang Wenju suppressed the most primitive impulse rising from deep within his heart and pried her hands apart little by little. "Wenju, can you kiss me?" Wenxia put aside all her self-esteem and said softly, "As long as you want, I will give you everything I have willingly." After watching Wenxia walk into the elevator, half an hour later, Shen Meiling let Yu Wei go. Yu Wei's legs felt a little weak, so she held onto the wall. "Just to remind you, room 3050. Shen Meiling looked at her mockingly. "Perhaps you can wait until tomorrow morning." Yu Wei saw the elevator door open and walked in without any hesitation. When she pressed the floor button, she noticed that her hands were shaking. For half an hour, neither Yang Wenju nor Wenxia came downstairs, which actually explained the problem, but for some reason, she still wanted to go upstairs, hoping to stop something. Yang Wenju's cold eyes flashed through my mind. In fact, during their 3 years of marriage, there was not only tension between them. When it was late at night and everyone was asleep, he would also hold her in his arms tenderly. She also has expectations for this marriage. Even if it is not unforgettable, she hopes that her marriage is warm. Thinking that at this moment, he might be revisiting the old days with Wenxia, Yu Wei felt a dull pain in her heart. I originally thought I could ignore it. After all, he didn't have her in his heart. But why was she a little scared? The elevator door opened, and just as Yu Wei was about to step out, she saw Yang Wenju standing outside the elevator door. Yang Wenju held his coat in one hand, and with the other, the sleeve of his black shirt was rolled up to his elbow. A 6 or 7 centimeter wound on his arm was bleeding. The moment he saw her, Yang Wenju's handsome face was instantly filled with hostility. Yu Wei stepped back subconsciously. Yang Wenju stepped into the elevator with his long legs. Only then did Yu Wei notice that his hair was soaked with sweat. At the same time, Li Wan and the doctor hurriedly came out of another elevator and walked towards room 3050. As soon as the elevator door closed, Yang Wenju grabbed her neck fiercely. Blood dripped from Yang Wenju's arm onto the carpet at the elevator entrance, and the elevator was soon filled with the smell of blood. Yu Wei's face turned red and she couldn't utter a word. Yang Wenju looked at her in pain, without a trace of pity in his dark eyes. "I really underestimated your determination to get a divorce. What, do you think you can get a divorce by scheming against me?" Yu Wei shook her head with difficulty. "Adding things to the wine, rose petals, aphrodisiac essential oils, Mrs. Yang is really good at doing this kind of thing." The strength in Yang Wenju's hands became stronger and stronger, and more blood flowed out because of his strength. Yu Wei couldn't breathe at all, her eyes gradually became blurry, and just when she thought she was going to suffocate to death, Yang Wenju finally let go. Yu Wei seemed to have lost all her strength. Yang Wenju held her and pushed her against the elevator. Suddenly, he lowered his head and bit her collarbone hard. Yu Wei frowned in pain and subconsciously pushed him away. "Yang Wenju, it's not me." Yang Wenju used his remaining rationality to ask her, "Then why are you here?" Yu Wei was speechless. Shen Meiling had planned everything so perfectly. "What did you hide behind the bathroom door? Did you give me that glass of wine?" His voice grew colder. Yu Wei's face turned paler and paler.